Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Protector of the Fairies in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Protector of the Fairies. Arrival at the City of Flowers. The city of Crocus was known to many as the City of Flowers. Streets were filled with bouquets of flowers while a large set of canals ran through the center of the town and around the inner district. Every house present was elegant and colorful, especially the palace positioned right in the center of the town behind a set of large walls. Ropes as well hung between houses, banners, and flags flying in preparation of the grand magic games that were to take place in only a day's time. Thousands of the residents in the town alone would be heading out to watch at the large arena nearby to the west of the city. Domus Flaw, an isolated arena to ensure any damage wouldn't spill out into the nearby city. The duo, however, didn't pay any attention to these wonderful sights, even if it was due to it being so dark out. Slipping through the shadows as best as they could, they made sure to avoid the main streets, relying on the side routes to get them to their destination out of sight. They finally came to a stop outside a small inn, a sign out front welcoming all guilds to stay at. They knew exactly what this sign meant. They'd accept anyone. The king really was serious, just as they had theorized. The two quickly hurried inside, not willing to risk being discovered by any passing patrols, even if they were outside of the Magic Council's authority while in Crocus. An old-looking man was waiting for them at the check-in desk, his eyes almost completely shut as he struggled to stay away. They snapped open as the door swung shut, the man spotting them immediately and trying his best to not show his panic. Hello. I assume you are here for the tournament. The two looked at each other before the taller of the two nodded at the other before he stepped forward, removing his hood. The man in front of him froze as he recognized the face hiding under the hood. Byakuya K. Kukaki? Is there a problem? Byakuya asked, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, and he made sure to allow that to be seen as well. The man in front of him didn't hesitate to respond. Oh no. It's all fine. How many rooms will you want? Byakuya reached into his cloak, terrifying the old man until he finally dropped a sack of jewels onto the table. All of them. All of them. Was I not clear? The old man rapidly shook his head as he grabbed the money. No, why you were clear. He hurriedly reached towards the back wall and pulled off all the keys before dumping them in front of Byakuya. Enjoy why your stay? Byakuya nodded as he took the keys, his companion following after him. You can take the hood off now, Mirti. The girl nodded as she removed her hood. It seems everything is going well so far. Do not assume things will always be so easy. This is the first hour. There are many days to go until the end of the tournament. Mirti nodded, giving a few glances to the building's interior as they walked towards the top floor. You think anyone will make any trouble? We did rent out the whole place, and some other dark guilds may not be so happy about that. We'll keep watch. I'll need you to head out tomorrow morning and keep an eye out with your magic for our friends. I'll keep a watch on the hotel and ensure no one else tries to attack. Is Makarov the first to be arriving? I expect so. A guild can only enter the tournament under a few specific conditions. One is that they must have been an official guild for at least a year, and this is regardless of its status in the eyes of the law so long as it is recognized as a guild. The second is that there must be a guild master, and that same guild master must register his guild in person on the morning of the day the tournament begins. Sometimes there is a knockout round, sometimes there isn't. It all depends on how many people sign up on that day. Are there any others? A few. The guild master is forbidden from participating him or herself, and that includes being in radio contact and giving advice. Shouting from the stands is the most they are allowed to do during the match, not that they won't all have plans thought up and shared for the upcoming possible matches. The reason the tasks are hidden is to stop any foolproof strategies appearing in time and to force the mages to rely on their own abilities. Can we help? Byakuya shook his head. You need the guild mark to be able to help during the tournament. Our role is similar to Makarov's, along with trying to scout out that mysterious magical power. 2 birds, 1 stone. Mirti paused as they passed a large window, leaning against it as she stared at the large building that was the king's palace. Mercurius looks nice tonight. It always does. It's the palace of the king. Have you ever been there? Inside, I mean. No. Not once has a rune knight been given permission to enter there in over 7 years. Byakuya paused himself as a thought crossed his mind. Did you consider it as well, sir? Indeed. Where better to hide such magic than in the one place we still will be forbidden to enter? I don't think we should try and get in there straight away, muttered Mirti, still staring at the building. There might be other places as well. And? You don't have to explain. I know. Mercurius is the king's home. If we are caught, and they would know it was us if they saw us, then Fairy Tail would be dragged down too. Byakuya sighed. To do what is right or to do what is necessary. I sometimes wonder why this world can't just be in black and white. It would remove any doubt in what is right to do. Well, that would be no fun, commented a voice from behind them. Byakuya didn't bother turning, already recognizing the magic of the person the instant they had appeared. He wasn't the one who acted first, however. Nozomi. Mirti lunged at the woman and managed to catch her off guard in a crushing hug. I missed you so much. It's been 3 months. It's just been 3 months. Mirti pouted as she released Nozomi, crossing her arms instead. Who cares? You didn't even say goodbye. Now that's just mean. Nozomi's stoic expression softened as she patted the younger woman on the head. I'm sorry, Mirti. Next time I'll try and remember. It is good to see you, Nozomi, said Byakuya politely. He looked at the man who was hanging back from them and gave him a nod as well. Miss Dogen. Good to see you, Byakuya, Miss Dogen commented, his arms crossed while his gaze continuously flickered around. Sorry about Miss Dogen, said Nozomi, noticing the man's actions. He's a bit tense. And you aren't? Asked Miss Dogen. Of course I am. I'm just better at hiding it. Byakuya gave a quick glance around, hoping he had simply missed someone. He hadn't. He remembered when Nozomi had briefly returned for a moment and had almost instantly been interrogated by Kisuke. The result hadn't resulted in a happy Kisuke, which meant whatever she told him had been either useless or hadn't been enough or even hadn't been anything at all. She hadn't stuck around long either, instead walking up to Miss Dogen before pulling him away through one of her portals. When she had returned during that time, she had been alone. And any questions asked about Ichigo had all resulting in her saying that he was fine and not to worry, repeated so much that it was like a broken record player. She and Miss Dogen hadn't been seen since then, and he had hoped that their return would have brought back Ichigo with them. It appeared it hadn't though. Any word on Ichigo? Nozomi shook her head, Miss Dogen scowling in the background. He's still not appeared. He doesn't actually know about the Grand Magic Games, which is the biggest issue we have to face. I was never informed until after I separated from him under his orders, which means he doesn't even know the tournament exists. If he gets out Gets out? Gets out of where? Nozomi's face went blank, hiding any expression she might have made as she shut her mouth. What she means, added Miss Dogen, is not relevant to the situation. If he returns, he will seek us out. I just wish he had taken us with him. We could be much more helpful than we are currently. I don't like waiting around for everything to unfold, and I don't like the idea of him not knowing what is going on right now. He'll be back, Nozomi muttered. He will be. We just have to be patient. If we're lucky, he'll be out just in time. Let's hope then. Sign-up begins tomorrow and the tournament itself begins the day after. If we want a chance to use him in it, then he'll need to be here before tomorrow night. If he's not here, the tournament will begin and we'll have to use a team constructed without him in it. But I fear without him, we may not be able to win everything fight. You sense it, right? The presence of so many strong mages, all gathering to this one great city. This tournament won't be simply a battle of mages. It'll be a battle of titans. A battle of monsters. Protector of the fairies. Natsu breathed a sigh of relief as he saw the large city in the distance. It had taken a week, but they were finally there. Gajeel and Laxus showed similar expressions, both glad to finally be there. They could have gotten there much sooner if they had been able to take trains, but there was too much risk of discovery that way. And with him and Gajeel limited to slower means of travel unlike Laxus's lightning form, there was no choice but to fly at a slower speed, happy and Panther Lily having to take regular breaks after such long journeys. It certainly didn't help as well that they had to take many detours to avoid cities and random patrols. "Finally there," muttered Gajeel in relief, a smirk crossing his face as he spoke. "Ah, it's been so long since I've had some decent food. Hopefully there's some good quality metal there." "If you want to go in now then be my guest," commented Laxus, eyeing the city warily. "It may allow us some leeway but there may be some reckless idiot who decides he wants try and bring us in, and who do you think will be blamed when things get crazy?" "It should be them," muttered Natsu. "But of course that would be the fair thing to happen. Life isn't always fair." Raising a hand, Laxus began to look around the surrounding area, seeing if he could spot anyone else. "Think we're the first here?" "We're not," said Gajeel, tapping his nose. "I can smell them. I'd say half of us are already here. I smell a particular familiar scent very close by. I think it's that Mirdi girl." "And another's." Gajeel sniffed the air again as if trying to confirm his suspicions. "I think that's Ichigo." "Ichigo." Natsu did the same, even Laxus trying as well though he knew he would be unable to identify things as well as Natsu and Gajeel could. "Oh yeah. That's definitely him. Where the hell is he then?" asked Laxus, giving up on the method the others were using as he switched to trying to sense Ichigo's magical power. He couldn't believe he had missed such a large source of energy before, only a few miles west of their current position. "There he is. Hey, do you guys want to go on ahead? I'll catch up later on." "You sure?" asked Natsu. "Oh, I'm sure." Laxus crackled his knuckles as a sinister smirk crossed his face. "I've got a few things to say to that orange-haired idiot. I may be a while." "Don't take out too much of your anger on him," called out Gajeel as he and Natsu started to go on ahead. "We still don't know who the master has decided on for the teams so you might want to be ready in case you're chosen." Laxus nodded before he shifted into lightning, sticking close to the ground as he traveled so to not cause any unwanted attention. It wasn't long before he was arriving where he had sensed Ichigo at, finding his friend sitting on a large rock facing the rising sun, a hand held out towards in. "Ichigo." Ichigo turned his head towards the source of the sound, a smile appearing on his face as he spotted Laxus. "Laxus. It's been a while hasn't it?" Laxus sighed before shooting forward and bringing his fist down on Ichigo's head. "You bastard." "Hey!" shouted Ichigo, rubbing his head with one hand while he used his other to grab Laxus's wrist. "What's the big idea?" "Oh? What's the big idea you say? How about the fact you ran off without a word? How about the fact that you didn't tell us you can see the form of Mavis Vermilion?" "No way. You know that? Did Wendy tell you?" "So it was true." Ichigo smiled awkwardly. "Ah, I really fell into that one didn't I?" Laxus sighed. "Never mind that. Where were you?" "Training. And getting my Zanpakuto." It was at this point Laxus calmed down enough to actually take in Ichigo's appearance. "Is that a dash? Shiakushou?" "Yeah, it has been a while since I wore one hasn't it? I figured it was time to return to those roots a bit, and for once I actually managed to wear the whole thing." "You did add a cloak though," Laxus muttered, noticing how Ichigo had tied a white cloak around his waist with black markings running along it. His gaze inevitably was drawn to the two swords Ichigo now had however, one large blade on his back while a smaller blade rested at his right-hand side at his waist. An X shape was made through the two shoulder pads he now wore, extending down across his chest with the left shoulder pad having what looked like red scales in the material in 3 rows. A similar design was over the pad that covered his smaller blade, but what bothered him the most was how familiar that shade of bone white was that made up so much of it. It was exactly the same color as Ichigo's hollow mask. "The sun's nice isn't it?" Ichigo commented randomly, having turned away again and re-raised his hand towards it. "I've been inside for a while so I've missed this feeling. It's so warm and bright, but not unpleasantly so." "Where have you been Ichigo?" asked Laxus, crossing his hands. "We've all been worried about you. And now you reappear with 2 blades, a whole new appearance, and where were you exactly if you haven't felt the sun in 3 months?" "The Holy Palace." Ichigo turned back round to face the shocked Laxus. "I found it Laxus." I found it. It's why I didn't return straight away. I needed time. Time to find it, time to understand it, and I do now. And it's wonderful. So, what is it? What is the Holy Palace? Ichigo shrugged. No idea. What? But you said dash. I said I understood it, but I never said I knew what it was. That place is far older than anything else in existence. It's the birthplace of magic Laxus. Its start and end, and we're on the scale of footnotes compared to it. I wish I could show you, I really do, but Hades tried and failed. You would too. As much as I might dislike that guy, he was something else in his prime. He was probably the closest anyone ever came to that place without being a Nookin or in the presence of one. But what about the fact Ziraf could go there, Ichigo? What about that? Ichigo didn't answer for a second, closing his eyes as he thought of an answer to that. Ziraf has the right to enter the Holy Palace, just like I do. It's a place of magic, and there is no law that stops someone like Ziraf from entering. If magic allowed his passage, then there is something in him that magic came to like. Even if it is simply destruction. Even if all he is to it is an incarnation of death, he would still be allowed in. There is no morality that can be judged normally in regards to this place. Laxus sighed. What about Mavis then? How are you able to talk to the ghost of our first master? You act like that's such a gift. She's actually quite annoying half the time. Right now she's annoyed at me and a few decisions I've made, so she's refusing to even come out of my mind. It's like the situation when you and Levi became freeloaders, except I can't just go to my room if I want some peace and quiet. She's in your mind? Isn't that, I don't know, possibly dangerous? Ichigo waved a hand in denial. Not really, or at least she hasn't given any indication that it's dangerous. If it is, well, she'll be in big trouble then. I'll show her to you sometime when she finally decides to stop acting like a spoiled child. I've had a bit of practice at actually making her visible to others. What kind of insane training have you been doing? Laxus asked, a depressed tone entering his voice. You really don't try and take things easy if you had time to add that onto that massive list. Never mind that. How have you been? Did you travel here alone? Or was Levi with you? I was with Natsu and Gajeel. They went on ahead. Laxus frowned at the persisting smile on Ichigo's face. You're happy. Happy? Of course I am. No, I mean you're really happy. Happier than I've ever seen you. I told you, Laxus. I understand now. Ichigo pressed his hands together as his smile grew. What I am, why I have the powers I do, it all makes sense. Take into account that Zanjitsu and I have sorted out any differences we had and that I get to see everyone again, I'd say today is a great day. How about you? Laxus could help but smile as well. Well, I suppose it is a pretty good day. Laxus stretched out a hand to help Ichigo up. Shall we head to the city? I'm sure the others are waiting for us. Ichigo nodded as he accepted Laxus's help to get up. That sounds good. Well, except for the part where the others start ranting at me for leaving. I should have just waited till everyone was together and just appeared then to get it all over with. Oh well, maybe next time. Laxus laughed, but Ichigo knew he didn't find it funny with the glare he was suddenly getting. There better not be a next time, Laxus muttered in annoyance. Next time I might just give up caring and see how you like it then. Protector of the fairies. Ichigo, Makarov said in surprise. He paused when he noticed the faint remains of a handprint on Ichigo's face, already healing quickly. Ah. I see you saw Levi. Everyone's reaction to me today seems to involve violence. The ones who've actually left me unharmed have been Mist Ugin, Nozomi, and now you. You missed out me, pointed out Urza, resting on a chair against one side of the room. She pointed her arm at him in accusation quickly though. They all have right, however. You did abandon us all without a word. We could have used you help in rescuing your student. I'm sure you all did a great job. Ichigo trailed off as he remembered the news he had heard, along with the slight frown that appeared on the master's face. Somewhat at least. All right, I'm sorry. I had things to do and I wasn't able to help out. But if it helps, I would have probably gone there to rescue him alone if you guys hadn't got him out, and in the state I was back then I probably would have barely lasted a few minutes with all the generals there. Not to go off topic here, but there is one important matter I should ask about considering your past medical situations. Are you going to die? Asked Makarov, Ichigo quickly shaking his head. Then all's okay then. You're fine now. It's nice to have a spark of good news every once in a while. I saw the entire guild here, you know. Isn't that a bit risky? What if we don't win? We don't have any other chances but this, Urza said before the master could answer. There is no other choice. I suppose. Ichigo glanced at her prosthetic arm in surprise. Hey, is that new? That's not wood. Urza looked down at the metal that now made up her fake arm before glancing back at him. Do you remember what Gildart's got? His prosthetic limbs were actually the prototypes for these, and 7 years has passed since then. The power these limbs contain. Urza paused as a happy smile snuck its way onto her face. Well, it feels like I've got my arm again. No hesitation, no need of telekinesis, just normal familiar movements. I love it. I mean, it's not like I'm not still confident in my abilities without it, but to be able to hold something by just willing the arm to move as if it was real. It's breathtaking. Poor Lyusica was working hard these past 7 years, explained Makarov for Ichigo's sake. She wasn't exactly very knowledgeable on this field, but she knew she might need it, especially due to the fact she wished she could have done more for Urza all those years ago. Don't let her know I told you this, but I think she's been feeling guilty all these years, and it was only when she saw the smile on Urza's face like this one right now that she finally managed to get over it all. Ichigo leaned down towards Urza, holding out a hand questioningly. May I? She relented quickly, extending her arm out towards him for him to hold. This is strong, he muttered as he applied small amounts of pressure to different areas. Very good quality. I saw Gildart's arm, but you weren't kidding when you said it was a prototype. There's so many differences here. Can you fight with it? I've spent half my time practicing with it. I'm confident enough. And the other half? Urza withdrew her hand with a smirk. I need a few surprises up my sleeve if we end up facing each other. Facing each other? Ichigo spun round towards Makarov in surprise. What's she talking about? That's actually the reason I called you here. I haven't told Urza much yet either, just the briefest of details, so I'll get right down to it. Ichigo, I trust you've been briefed on why we are all here. Ichigo nodded. The Grand Magic Games. It's our only chance of getting back into being a legal guild. Good, I'll get straight down to it. I went to sign up Fairy Tail earlier today as quickly as I could and discovered there's been a strange change this year. Not only are dark guilds able to participate, as we already knew, but the limit of teams has now been raised from 1 to 2. 2 teams. Ichigo glanced at Urza. So that's why you want to keep some things a secret. A bit of friendly competition. Once everyone has been eliminated, it'll be one team against the other. Make sure you all remember that, stressed Makarov. Now there is no guarantee both teams will get through to the actual tournament, hence why we need to maximize our chances. If both teams do, however, and you ever end up forced to fight one another, there will be points available for draws. Consider the points and decide what it best. It also may come down to one team trying to build up as many points as they can, even if they have to use the other to do so, though I doubt many of you will accept willing losing, even to one another. If you only called us in, then you must have specific reasoning to, pointed out Ichigo curiously. So what is the plan? What are the teams? I thought about it very carefully and then I decided that it would be best to stop trying. I'm not the right person to decide who will be best to work together with others when I don't even know what they are like when on missions apart from what I hear. Therefore, I have decided on the 2 team captains instead. You too. It's an honor that you have such faith in us, Master, Urza said respectfully. I assume we can pick whoever we want then. You may. I assume you already have picked your choices. Urza nodded. I have. How many mages can we have? 5, including yourself. I see. Urza nodded again. I've got it. I'll take Natsu and Gray for starters. They are not only here but I can also rely on them both in a pinch. I thought you might. Any others? Yes. I'd like to take Lucy and Wendy as well. Those two. Makarov didn't bother hiding his surprise. Are you sure? I understand that you work together well, but are you sure they will both be suited to it? Lucy, while a splendid mage, is still learning herself at some areas. And Wendy is still young. Aren't we all learning, Master? And I did fight with her on Tenro Island. I'm sure she will be invaluable. As for Wendy, she's been doing a lot of training these past few months. I know it doesn't seem like her magic has grown as much as we expected, but she does have a stronger air to her now. She also can use very powerful support magic. Surely that is a worthy trait to take a risk on. Makarov frowned for a moment before nodding. You know best. All right, I'll defer to you on this matter then. Ichigo? What about you? Isn't it obvious? Asked Ichigo, a smirk across his face. Laxus definitely. How is that not a surprise? Who else? Let's see. Levi for sure. Her magic is quite multifunctional, and we can't dismiss the power she can pull out in a pinch. And I can't discount Shinji. He's strong, but, most importantly, he's unusual. Not many people can get used to his fighting style when he starts trying to mess with them. And then finally Taoshiro, I assume. Ichigo paused before shaking his head sadly. He isn't strong enough. What? But can't you feel his magic? He's grown tremendously over the years. He even said he learned Bankai. Yes, muttered Ichigo sadly. He's learned Bankai. I know that. And yet his sword is so silent. It's so quiet. I knew it from the moment I walked past him, my hand brushing his shoulder. That connection is so weak it might as well not exist. Hyorin Meru is there, I don't doubt that, but Hyorin Meru is not all there is to his Zanpakuto. The only reason I think it sticks around is because of how closely it is linked to his Dragon Slayer powers. I can't take him in when his strongest weapon has been stolen. Not, if pressured, his full strength would not even be able to help out. Stolen. Makarov opened his mouth but no words came forth. Ichigo chuckled at his expression, the laughter more morbid than anything else. It's a horrible thing to happen to a Shinigami. The only people capable of such feats are the ones who have been at conflict with them since both of them started. It's only possible due to the magic of a Quincy. Why didn't he tell us? Asked Urza. Surely we can help. Would you willingly admit you lost a portion of your soul? Would you want help when the shame of having it stolen right under your nose hurts you more than anything else? Ichigo sighed. Taoshiro doesn't know I know. But I saw it. I look at his blade and I see how empty it has become. Wendy could probably see it too, I believe, but she won't likely understand what she is seeing and that it's wrong, not that I can check with her currently. And you do. Makarov crossed his arms. Is this due to the influence of this holy palace that you were telling Levi about? Were you listening in, Master? Ichigo shrugged. Well, it's not a problem, but yeah, that is the main premise of it all. I didn't see Wendy here, by the way. Or Natsu for that matter, despite both being here. Where are they? They went for a walk, replied Urza. They have their cloaks up so they should be fine, so long as they don't cause trouble. Let's hope nothing happens then, muttered Ichigo warily. Anyway, my last member of the team will be Mistagen. He's strong enough, and he has the guild mark, so there should be no problems. Any problems with the team, Master? Makarov shook his head. No, they are all fine. This does sort out all our problems for now. Make sure everyone knows to be in their rooms at midnight. No one can be outside. I'd advise that teams spend the night together in preparation for whatever is going to happen. I honestly have no idea, and I don't think anyone else does either. Be ready for anything. Urza and Ichigo both nodded before leaving together. I'm going to head into town for a while then, said Ichigo as he started to head for the stairs. I might as well enjoy a bit of this peace while it lasts. Be careful. If you find Natsu and Wendy, keep an eye on them if you can. She paused as she realized he didn't have one of Kisuk's cloaks. Ah, hold on. You'll want one of these cloaks to suppress your magic. That won't be necessary, Urza, Ichigo said, cutting her off before she could reach for her own to lend to him. Those cloaks don't work for me anymore. What? How? It's my magic, Ichigo said, flicking at the air and causing a flicker of golden light to appear beside him. Besides, these guys just like to play up. Even if you hide my presence, I'm sure you would still notice the high concentration of the magic around me. Kisuke makes good cloaks, but they aren't good enough, I'm afraid. Urza reluctantly took back her cloak. If you're sure. Be careful. And if you see any others roaming about, send them back. It's only a few days so they can explore to their heart's content afterwards. Got it, said Ichigo as he headed for the stairs, leaving swiftly. The innkeeper gave him a scared look but didn't do anything. He didn't like seeing those looks. He didn't like seeing people so afraid of him like that. Now where could they been? He muttered, using a small burst of magic to help him leap up to the top of a building. He raised a hand to his eyes as he tries to look through the crowds, but it was simply too busy, even with trying to spot something so obvious. Damn it, you lot like to hide, don't you? He flicked his wrist before he let some of the magic around him spread out, enhancing his senses as he tried to pinpoint the others' locations. Not you, definitely not you, familiar but no, there's Wendy. And Natsu's right by her. And... Ichigo paused as he double-checked the sensation he was feeling from the magic. That's like Natsu's and Wendy's magic. Gajeel? Laxus? No, they're back at the hotel. Taoshiro? No, he's back there too. So who the hell are you two? Leaping across the sky, Ichigo sped towards the unfamiliar two. They were far too close to Natsu and Wendy for him to dismiss it as coincidence, and it didn't help that their magic was starting to flare up. He had to move quickly. He arrived just in time to hear the voice of one of the sources of the magic, a blonde-haired man who looked about Natsu's age. It is you, isn't it? Natsu Dragneel, the dragon slayer who couldn't even kill a single dragon. Protector of the fairies. Gray found himself wandering the place aimlessly, not bothering with trying to disguise himself. He had meant to take the cloak, but he didn't want to degrade himself to hiding. He was strong, and he wasn't going to act like a scared rat because some old man was afraid of the law. Ah! He clenched his fists angrily as he swallowed that dark thought and shoved it as far down as he could. He had to calm down. He couldn't just act as the voice told him to. He was Gray. He was not who the voice wanted him to be. It would have been easier to focus though if he wasn't getting all those stares. Who cared that he was a member of Fairy Tail? The way they were looking, hurrying out of his way in fear, maybe he should show them a reason to be afraid. Gray smirked. Yes, that was it. He'd teach them a lesson. Power was always the best way. Show them a display they'd never be able to reason away. Show them something to truly make them cower in fear. Then draw it out until they begged for the sweet release of Dia. No. He shouted, not caring how everyone around him jumped back in fear or how the rumors of him being mad or that he was speaking to himself were spreading. Damn it, he muttered quietly. Shut up. I'm me. I am me. I'm no one else. I'm Gray. It had become almost a mantra for him these past 3 months. He had tried to search for help without telling the master, but it was no good. He simply couldn't get to the places with the information that could truly help him unless they managed to return to being a legal guild. He just had to hold out. Maybe a week more and they could start getting leads. Gray. Gray froze. He recognized that voice. He turned round in surprise to see both Leon and Jovia, though there was a third person with them he didn't recognize. A baby. It is you, said Leon, rushing forward and pulling his old friend into a hug. Whispers started to spread which caused Gray to try and push Leon back. Calm down, Leon, Gray muttered. You want to risk your guild's reputation right now. Like I care at the moment. It's been 7 years, and here you are looking practically the same. Leon paused, noticing the bold red veins visible in Gray's eyes and the bags under them too. Are you all right? I'm fine, said Gray gruffly, not wanting to voice the words he was actually hearing in his head. This was his friend. Friends worried about each other. He wasn't being made fun of. He tried to ignore the words as best as he could, turning instead to Juvia. "How are you, Juvia? I heard you left the guild." That came out a lot angrier than he wanted it to. Juvia looked down, Leon rushing to her aid. "Don't get angry at her about that. It's my fault." Leon hesitantly raised a small ring on his ring finger, making Gray notice how a matching one was on Juvia's hand too. "We got married. It took a while for me to manage to win her heart. I guess that's the advantage a fool like me might have in trying to attempt impossible goals, but she finally agreed to go out with me. And when our daughter, was born, I begged her to leave Fairy Tale. You have to understand dash." "I do," Gray said, faking a smile. He couldn't let them see anything but that. Not when every thought in his mind was screaming at them in betrayal. You didn't want to risk losing her or her. Fairy Tale was a dark guild after all. Gray leaned down towards her, patting her on the head hesitantly and doing his best not to let his hand tighten. "So you named her after her, did you?" he asked as he pulled his hand away, hoping they didn't notice how tense he was getting. "How old is she?" "She's 1 right now," answered Juvia. "As for her name, let's just say Leon can be stubborn about a lot of things." Carefully handling her to Leon, she spoke softly. "Can you give us a few minutes?" Leon looked between the two before nodding hesitantly. He knew he shouldn't be afraid, but he also knew Juvia had loved Gray for years and now here he was just as she remembered him. His fear must have been obvious to Juvia, however, as her hand rose to his cheek and brushed along it gently. He looked towards her only to see that smile on her face. The one she showed to no one else but him. "Don't worry," she whispered to him. "My heart belongs to you. Do you really think you could lose it so easily now?" Leon smiled sheepishly before making sure he was holding her carefully. "We'll just be over there," he said, pointing towards one of the nearby stalls. "How about you, he asked as well as he started walking. "Want to see the funny items with Daddy?" Gray watched the two leave before he finally spoke. He always did hate the fact that he lost his family. I suppose having her and you is a dream come true to him. "It is. For me as well." Juvia pressed her hands together nervously. "I'm sorry." "Sorry? Sorry for what?" "How I was back then." Juvia shook her head sadly. "I must have caused you so much grief. I stalked you. I became obsessed with you. You must have found me so annoying. I even waited for 3 years, waiting for you to one day return." "Yeah," muttered Gray awkwardly. "I can't deny you did have some weird tendencies. But they were sweet at least. And it was the way you were back then. We knew you had some difficulties in adjusting to things and we just all accepted it because you were one of us. I'm glad then. I thought you'd be pleased, seeing me how I am now. Are you happy?" "Huh?" Gray scowled. "Are you happy?" he slowly repeated, putting emphasis on each word. "It's a simple question. Are you happy?" Juvia smiled at him. "Yes. I'm very happy." "Good then. Then there's nothing else to worry about. The past is the past. It's my fault and the others as well for being stuck in the past for so long. I'm glad you were able to move forward. You didn't cling to the past forever, unlike a particular duo I've come to know." "Pardon. Ignore that. But let me say one thing. I won't go easy on Leon during the tournament. I plan to win." "You better be prepared to fight me as well then," said Juvia confidently. "I'll show you all that I've managed to move forward. I'll show you all as well how thankful I am for all you did for me." Gray smiled back as he watched her leave, waving goodbye as she left. He could see there were a few strange looks at them all and he knew that might be useful for changing even a few opinions of them all. He was just glad they couldn't hear his inner thoughts. He was happy for Juvia. He was happy for Leon. If he kept repeating that, would the thoughts desiring their deaths go away? Protector of the Fairies. Sting crossed his arms as he faced his old hero in front of him. Whilst he looked confident, and the crowd slowly gathering helped boost that further, internally he was screaming at himself. Why had he done that? God, he was an idiot. He had seen Natsu and had wanted to call out to him happily. This was a chance to meet the man who had inspired him after all. And yet the words that left his mouth had been those of an insult. Why? Why of all times did he have to stick his foot in his mouth now? It certainly didn't help that the crowd was subtly trying to egg the situation on. He could tell that, if it came down to it, they would side with him if anything happened. And he really didn't want to get Natsu in trouble if he could help it. What did you say? Natsu snarled at him, and he knew he was losing his chance to stop this now. He just had to apologize. That's all he had to do. You heard me. What kind of dragon slayer can't even defeat a single dragon? What, did your magic just tickle him? No. Damn, he had to stop this. The crowd was getting more restless. They wanted to see a fight, and he knew Natsu was too impulsive to back down. Natsu took a step forward before he stopped, unclenching his fists as he retracted his foot. You know what, yeah. You're right. I couldn't do it. I couldn't defeat Acknowledge. He was too strong for us all together. Natsu, backed down. That wasn't like anything he knew about the man. Natsu never ran from anything, whether it was a fight or an insult. What was he doing now? Why wasn't he shouting back at him? Really? So is your entire guild that weak then? I bet me and Rogue could have taken down Acknowledge with ease. Sting. Rogue hissed from beside him, but he ignored him, already too caught up in both the moment and his inner conflict at the situation. It was made worse when Natsu began to laugh. Oh yeah, we were all that weak. It took Ichigo using Bankai to manage to crack the scales, and it was only Laxus who even managed to make it cry out in pain, and that took his strongest technique to do that too. We were nothing. Natsu glanced at the two critically before shaking his head. Don't take this the wrong way, but, right now, the two of you would be in exactly the same situation as we were. Completely helpless. What did you say? Sting hissed out. He was seeing red, his anger blocking out his reason and the thoughts telling him he was getting carried away in the moment. Natsu slowly turned away, telling the blue-haired girl to follow him when he made his move. He lunged forward, a simple punch aimed at Natsu's head. He realized too late what he was doing and tried to stop, but it was too late. It wasn't that his fist connected with Natsu, however. His wrist had been caught in a tight vice-like grip by a long red-haired man, tattoos on his face and arms. What are you doing, Sting? The man asked. Getting into fights already? Renji? You're here. Sting quickly shook his head, trying instead to pull his arm free. Why the hell did you stop me? Well, it was either me or him. Renji pointed a thumb back over his shoulder, drawing Sting's attention to the orange-haired man standing on the room nearby. Wait, orange hair? That meant he was. Yep. That's Fairy Tail's own big-named Shinigami. Now then, which of us did you want to stop you? I can be rougher if you want. I can guarantee it would be a much better outcome than him getting involved instead, considering he'll be your enemy tomorrow. They haven't passed yet, Sting protested. What makes you sure they will even get through to the actual tournament? You think they won't? Asked Rogue, watching the other two Dragon Slayers carefully. I apologize for my friend's actions. He gets ahead of himself when he gets excited. He's actually been really looking forward to seeing you, Natsu. He's your biggest fan. Hey, you bastard. Don't go spilling other people's secrets. Hey, it's no problem, said Natsu quickly. Besides, it's nice to see people like that anyway. You're calmer, Natsu, Ichigo said as he joined the two, appearing beside the group with a burst of speed. The old you wasn't nearly able to think things through so calmly. Well, I needed to slow down, explained Natsu as he put a hand on the back of his head sheepishly. Anger isn't always going to help me. I've learned that the hard way. That's good to see. Ichigo turned his gaze towards Renji before raising a hand. So you're Renji, I assume. You've heard of me? Not at all. But they said that was your name, so I'll assume they weren't lying. Renji briefly shook Ichigo's hand before releasing it again. I have to say, I didn't expect to see a whole load of new Shinigami after so long. I didn't expect to see the return of a long-dead one too, said Renji as he crossed his arms, a smirk on his face. Don't tell me, are you an actual god of death? Ichigo shook his head as he laughed. Ah, that would be good. No, I'm here just because of a large amount of luck combined with a ridiculously strong barrier. As you can see, however, it took us 7 years to actually get out of it. I'll look forward to meeting you in the games tomorrow. That is, of course, so long as you make it through the preliminaries. Oh really? You doubt Sabretooth? We'll be there. We have a title to defend. Then we'll meet again then. We'll take our leave if you don't mind. Natsu, Wendy, let's go. I think this is enough trouble for one day. Renji watched the three go before he turned back to Sting and Rogue. Try and avoid getting into any more trouble if you can. Learn from their example. Aren't they technically a dark guild? Pointed out Rogue. Not the best example to follow. They're the results of tragedy. Be careful, however. We're lucky they actually are calm enough to back off. I felt it when I shook his hand. That Shinigami's strong. Even if he was defeated, he'd do a lot of damage in the process. That kind of power isn't natural. Remember that if you ever face him. I won't be there to protect you two next time. Protector of the Fairies. The preliminaries. So that's what happened, said Ichigo as he finished hearing Natsu's tale of his training. I'm impressed. How did you even come up with that idea? I just figured the stuff Igneel taught me wouldn't be able to help with this, explained Natsu honestly. He's great and all, but I don't think he ever had this to worry about. It's strange to fight that way though. I'm not used to it. You'll get used to it. Hell, you've seen how my style of fighting has changed over the years. Oh yeah, muttered Natsu, remembering how he had once seen Ichigo sever his own leg to escape the brunt of a trap. I'll never understand how you can do that to yourself. What if you didn't heal? I had those same fears myself. Luckily Shinji knew just how to make me snap out of it all. That might have involved chopping my arm off, however, and waiting for it to regrow. He's really brutal, isn't he? Natsu shook his head as they approached the hotel. I don't know how Gray managed to last 3 months with him. He's in Saw. Natsu looked at Ichigo warily, realizing he was about to insult the man's friend. Luckily it seemed Ichigo hadn't noticed, or if he had then he wasn't taking offense to it. Oh, you and Wendy are on Urza's team for the tournament. There's 2 teams. Really? Natsu shivered. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Probably both. Natsu nodded. Yeah, you're probably right. I might as well go ahead and ask her what the plan's going to be. Natsu waved in farewell as he ran the last part of the journey, leaving Wendy alone with Ichigo. She snuck a glance at him before gripping her staff in nervousness, unsure of how to say what she wanted to say. I can see them as well. She looked up in surprise. That's what you wanted to ask, isn't it? I figured you would have noticed me glancing at nothing or how it acts differently than before. Stronger than before. Wendy nodded hesitantly. How can you see them? I thought it was only sky magic users who could. Oh, it is only you lot. I'm a bit different. More of an anomaly when it comes down to it. You could have someone with my exact same powers and they might not necessarily be able to see it. The hesitation slowly left Wendy as excitement broke into her voice, for the first time being able to talk with someone else about what she saw since Grandini. So then did you see it all? She waved her hands to her sides as she gestured wildly around the city. There's so much magic here. It's like it's being gathered because of everyone here. There's so many strong mages everywhere. Excited are we? Ichigo laughed as she smiled in embarrassment, but she didn't look down or away. I don't blame you. I'm kind of excited myself. Ichigo glanced towards Mercurius before he frowned. Gathering, you say? Wendy nodded. Yeah. She followed his gaze before she pointed at the tower. That's the center of it all. I noticed. But why isn't it Domus Flaw? That's where we're all going to be fighting. Wendy shook her head. I don't know. Maybe it's because we're staying here. Her answer was weak and they both knew it. Well, I suppose we'll get a clue as the games begin. You'll be fighting yourself as I said before. You feel ready for it? Wendy nervously shook her head. I'm not really as strong as everyone else. I don't want to let anyone down, but You afraid of doing so? Wendy nodded. Don't worry. No one will blame you, so all you can do is go up from there. But my magic, Wendy protested. It didn't go up nearly as much as everyone else's did. I spoke with the master, but he didn't know what to say. Did you speak with Kisuk? Wendy tilted her head innocently before shaking her head. No. Why? Did he seem worried at all or confused when you gained second origin? Again Wendy shook her head. No, he didn't. Then don't worry. If he wasn't confused, then he expected this to be the case. That doesn't mean you are weak, Wendy. It means there is simply something you've yet to obtain. Something you've yet to realize. Wendy frowned, unsure of what Ichigo was talking about. He shook his head before ruffling her hair, much to her displeasure as she tried to fix the mess he made. Don't worry yourself thinking on it too much. It'll all come clear in time. I'm sure it will. Hey, if it did for me, then I've got no doubts it will for you. Ichigo paused as he glanced at the inn they were all staying at. I haven't seen Kisuk anyway? Is he here at all? Wendy shrugged. I'm not sure. I remember seeing him with the master before I left with Levi. I don't know what happened to him after that. I see. Ichigo shrugged as well. Well, I'm sure he's up to whatever he does normally. He'll realize I've resurfaced soon enough, and if he hasn't, then the Grand Magic Games should catch his eye enough to spot me. He'll be here soon enough, I guarantee it. Wendy nodded, not really as confident in that happening as Ichigo was. Won't he be mad at you? He seemed annoyed when anyone brought you up. Oh, he's just mad I left him behind. He can't stay mad at me forever. Or at least I hope he can't. A small check of the time had Ichigo rushing her in. Better meet up with the others, however. With whatever happens tonight, we'll need something to eat before it all begins. I don't want to stay up all night with an empty stomach. Protector of the Fairies. Deep within the marble halls of Mercurius, Toma e Fiori waited, sitting on his throne as regally as was expected from the king of all of Fiori, even if his short stature worked against him at times. In front of him kneeled 5 men and women, each having sworn an oath to serve him even since he had employed their services 10 years ago. They were the Garu Knights. The first was Kama. The leader of the 5, he was always hiding a lot of himself behind a cloak and a set of armor, though the usual part that covered the lower half of his face had been removed for the meeting. He knew the man, and it was how he knew it was a sign of respect. The man didn't hide anything from him after all. Like always, the man had his 2 scythes attached to his back, always ready to be drawn at a moment's notice. The second was a violet-haired woman, her hair stretching past her shoulders in a messy fashion. A large puffy cap rested on her head and a similar matching coat was worn over the rest of her clothes. Unlike her serious leader, she was a lot more relaxed and she had a fascination for beautiful things. Part of him always wondered what it was that made her stay. Her loyalty or the fact the city was filled with flowers. Third was Yuasuk, an almost bald man with his remaining hair pulled back into a long spiky ponytail. No matter what the weather, the man always wore the same 2 things. His open vest and his blue shorts. Out all 5 that, he was by far the strangest of the lot. It wasn't just how he looked. It was how he acted. At all times the man kept up that playful attitude, to the point where he wasn't even sure if it was a lie or not. Kamikia stood next to him as number 4. She had her long black hair tied back neatly into 2 even ponytails, while a small braided section of her hair was shaped into a loop around each ponytail. Getting the woman to ever cut her hair was a challenge, as it stretched all the way to the ground currently, stopping just above her ankles. Her attire was more like a robe than a dress, wooden sandals being used as shoes to keep with the look she liked to go for. Out of them all, Kamiko was the one who truly got pleasure out of the work they did. The fact she loved her job, however, meant she was less likely to ever betray him. Why would she when serving him gave her everything she wanted? Finally there was Neppa. The man was large, all of it muscle. He wore almost casual clothes and even had a bottle of alcohol in his hands, or at least what appeared to be alcohol. The liquid inside sometimes looked like the poison Neppa used, so it was hard to tell what he drank most of the time. So long as it didn't interfere in the man's duties, however, he had no complaints. I assume you have all been briefed in your duties? Asked Toma, looking amongst them all for any sign of unease or confusion. There was none. Good. The inclusion of dark guilds into the games has tripled the amount of guilds entering, including pushing more legal guilds who never participated in to join. The two-team rule as well has increased the number of mages that will be participating tonight. The Eclipse project is moving at full swing so long as this all keeps up. Your Highness, spoke Kama. What is to be done about the dark guilds when they don't get through to the next round? For the safety of our citizens, I ask that you give us the order to eliminate them. A good idea, but one that will be dangerous for us if the Magic Council were to learn of the strange occurrences within this city too early. I do not trust Grand Doma. He has been acting far too suspiciously for the past few years. He even refuses to speak to me most times. I fear he may try to usurp control not long from now. So you want to distract them, said Kamika in amusement. Send the Dark Guilds back out and having the Magic Council too distracted at trying to round them all up while they are all so closely packed together. You want to play for time. Indeed. We need a week at most. At that point the Eclipse project will be ready. If it isn't, then it will all be too late. I don't think we'll have another year till Grand Doma acts. If gets a hold of Eclipse, I fear what he might do. Already he has begun pressuring the Zentopia Church and I doubt it will be long before he creates some reason to invade them or, in the eyes of the public, eliminate a threat to Fiori. Once he realizes what we've done, he'll waste no time on moving on to here, the last bastion that freely and legally can resist his will. Can we have fun in the tournament too, Tai? Toma glanced towards Yuasuk as he heard the verbal tick the man had. I see no reason for you all to not. Remember however that your goal is to ensure a watchful eye is kept on Fairy Tail at all times. You think they will make it? Asked Neppa. They may not even get into the main event. They have to. If they don't then all this will have been worthless. They are a tenacious guild, and they will push everyone else to higher limits and force them to the peak of the strength. The more magic used, the more magic gathered. If they don't get in, the only other dark guild that might is Tartarus, and if they are participating then the same rule applies. Beautiful chaos, Cosmos muttered, a smile on her face. I look forward to it all. Remember, you must ensure you secure a place in the Grand Magic Games. Do whatever is necessary. I cannot get you in if you fail, so ensure you do not. Yes, sir. Rang out 5 voice. Toma dismissed them all before the large room returned to its lonely quiet self. Well, Toma supposed, it wasn't completely quiet. He could hear the breathing of the girl behind the far pillar. I know you're over there, Hiswai. His daughter slowly peeked her head out from behind the pillar, smiling at him sheepishly as she pushed a strand of her green hair back behind her ear. Hey Dad. Toma sighed. How many times have I told you, Hiswai? You can't keep eavesdropping on my private conversations. Hiswai crossed her arms definitely. You always know I'm there. If it really was private then you'd kick me out. That's because you make too much noise. I would appreciate some respect from time to time. Honestly, you're so respectful to everyone else, but with me you seem to argue against everything I do. Mum did, protested Hiswai. And you never complained about that. Oh, I did. I just did it when she was still alive. Toma smiled sadly as he remembered those memories. I'll let you off today but no more. This time I mean it. You are a princess. Princesses should not be snooping around as much as you do. I'll try, Hiswai muttered, relenting a bit. So you're moving on with the Eclipse project? I have. Toma eyed her suspiciously. You're more okay with it than you used to be. I've been noticing that. Ever since a few days ago you've been actually interested in it. Is something the matter? Hiswai shook her head rapidly. It's nothing, Dad. Just, with the project so close to competition, I finally got a bit interested in what it did. That's all. I see. Toma sighed. Well, make sure to keep clear of it. I'll have Arcadios report to me if you do. You don't have to worry, Hiswai said as she tried to reassure her father. I'll be good. I'll be busy watching the games anyway. Everyone's been talking about it. She froze when she realized what she had said. I mean dash. You don't have to pretend or try and hide it. I stopped caring after you snuck out of the castle for the 100th time. So long as you keep Arcadios by your side, you can go wherever you want in Crocus. Just make sure you are careful, for God's sake. There are plenty of dark guilds here and you would be their ticket to whatever they wanted if they got a hold of you. I will not see you hurt because of such brutes. His wife smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, I'll be careful, Dad. Protector of the fairies. Lights burst across the sky the moment the clocks hit midnight, blasting away the darkness as a large hologram of a pumpkin figure appeared in the sky. Good morning, everyone. As if like clockwork, every single team was at the window of their rooms, watching the sky with bated breath. Beginning now, the elimination round can commence in full swing. Over 300 of you all signed up and we're looking forward to seeing which of you can continue forward. The pumpkin figure raised a finger and shook it as if it annoyed about something. Not I was looking forward to a mass brawl, but apparently that is too messy according to the advisors. Instead we'll have to settle for a different method and try and capture the best scenes for my future entertainment. As he finished speaking, all the inns in the entire city began to rise. Paths grew from every window towards a large labyrinth that was rapidly being constructed in the air, shaped as a large sphere. To settle this all, we're going to have a little race. The first 8 teams to make it to me at the goal win. Those who fail to reach me in time will lose. I should point out as well that we aren't responsible for any lives lost in the labyrinth. The pumpkin smiled sinisterly as he glanced around. If you want to back out, now's the time. For those willing to continue, find your way through and make it to Domus Flaw. I should point out that we are tracking you all, so if any of you decide to take a shortcut to go around the labyrinth, we'll know. The pumpkin immediately pointed towards different inns, including the one fairy tale was it. So don't you dare try and skip it, you stupid Shinigami. And that goes double for any Quincy among you. I will not have a repeat of last year. What do you think happened last year? Muttered Shinji as he watched the pumpkin with a bored expression on his face. I doubt they took the ability to fly into account when they made a lot of these challenges, pointed out Levy. Outside of Shinigami and Quincy, how often do you find someone able to move around so easily in the air? Now then, continued the pumpkin, as if he hadn't had his previous outburst. You may. Wait for it. I really love my job, you know. Go. Every team rushed out the window, rushing up the pathway as it began to crumble behind them. It only pressured them all to run faster, most of the guilds barely making it in before the whole path crumbled. Some guilds weren't as lucky, falling before reaching the goal. Ah, it seems we've lost our first few teams. Better luck to the others, I say. Ichigo looked around as they stepped onto the strange platforms, stairs going all over the place and platforms appearing at random angles. Well, they didn't want to make this easy, did they? He muttered, looking around. How the hell are we going to even get through this? I can help with that, said Levy, holding out her hand as letting the word for map appear. It quickly shaped itself into a new form until they had a miniature replication of the maze they were in from the outside. That layer was quickly stripped away before a single point appeared on the map where they were. It's going to be a bit complex, but I should be able to chart our progress with this at least. Should we wait for the others? Asked Miss Doggan. They should have entered somewhere nearby. Why should we? Asked Shinji in return. Think about it. Only 8 teams can participate. We need to prioritize ourselves first here. We can't afford to wait around for them. As much as I don't want to admit it, said Laxus, but Shinji is right here. We can't wait, and we don't even know where they might have ended up. They were being directed higher than we were, so it stands to reason that they are on a completely different path. What are we waiting for then? Levy quickly began to jog ahead of the rest, glancing along the paths. There's a lot of routes to take. Which should we go down? We all need to reach the goal, right? Levy nodded at Ichigo's question. Damn. There goes splitting up. The goal's north of here, I believe. And north is that way, said Miss Doggan as he pointed with his hand. I've been keeping track just in case. That's good to know, said Shinji, the group taking the first path to their left. How do we get there from here, however? As Levy said before, The ability to fly is rare. So how does everyone else get from this labyrinth's exit towards Domus Flaw? That's why we need to be quick, replied Ichigo. Think about it as much as you want and we might still not know the answer until we get there. Let's just focus on one step at a time. Now that's an interesting map, called out another guild as they looked down at them from a platform above them. They smirked sinisterly as he held out a hand. Why don't you give it to us before our They were cut off by the cries of pain as the sheathed form of Shinji's Zanpakuto slammed into them all. Annoying pests. Let's keep going. The pattern happened multiple times as they progressed. Every so often another guild would show up and try to fight them only for one of them to quickly dispatch them. This really has become a nuisance, commented Mist Ogden as he took down the latest group of mages. They don't seem to want to listen to reason. You're one of the few who gives them what the hell. The floor shifted beneath them all as the labyrinth rapidly began to spin. Levi screamed as she lost her footing and went flying down, Ichigo lunging off the platform after her. He grabbed her tightly before halting himself in the air, immediately dodging the rotating floors that almost hit him. After a few seconds the whole maze stopped spinning but they were separated. They couldn't see Laxus or the others. What happened? Asked Levi as she looked around at the maze warily. Did it just dash? Yes. They really want to narrow down the participants. Breaking news, said the pumpkin, his voice traveling throughout the maze. I'm pleased to announce that only a fifth of you remain. Hang it then all of you. Literally for some of you. A fifth left. Ichigo glanced down and spotted a few groups of mages through gaps in the maze. That many fell? They must have, said Levi as she looked at her map. Damn it, it's going to be impossible to find a path to the others. She gestured at the map with her staff in annoyance as Ichigo leaned over. See? There's our old point and here's our new one. We're halfway through the maze from them, muttered Ichigo in annoyance. Can this get worse? Congratulations. Ichigo and Levi's heads snapped up as they heard the pumpkin's voice again. Lamia Scale has taken first place. What a surprising turn of events. And it looks like a few others are almost there too. That bastard, muttered Ichigo. He's messing with us. Trying to make us rush. What are we going to do? We need to meet up with the others but we don't even know where they are from this original point if they've started moving. They could have gone searching for us in the wrong direction. Ichigo sighed. No choice then. Hey Pumpkinhead. Amazingly the pumpkin actually heard him, materializing as a hologram in front of them. Hey. That's incredible rude. Whatever. Tell me, it's forbidden to go around this maze, right? That's the only rule being enforced. The pumpkin nodded suspiciously. Yes. Why? Just had to check. I didn't want to get disqualified for doing this. Reaching for the blade on his back, Ichigo pulled it out of its sheath and let a massive burst of energy spiral around the blade. Hold on, said the pumpkin urgently, realizing what Ichigo was about to do. Now let's think about this. You don't really want to ruin all the hard work we did to make this thing, do you? Ichigo, are you sure this is wise? Asked Levi, a trace of fear in her voice. Let's think about this dash. Get Chuga Tenshou. Or not. Screamed Levi as Ichigo slashed down with the blade, the wave of energy slicing through the giant maze from one side to the other. The pumpkin looked at the maze in horror before the two sides began to fall away from one another. My maze. Now's our chance. Shouted Ichigo, grabbing Levi and propelling them forward as quickly as he could. A spark of light flashed towards him and he knew it was Mistogen before the man even reached him, a bolt of lightning right behind him. Shinji appeared between the two, sighing in mock frustration. Honestly Ichigo, this was the best solution. Shinji smirked. Not that I'm complaining. This is much simpler. Rushing down to Domus Flaw, the group landed in front of a sobbing pumpkin, Jura, and his team in the process of leaving as they landed. My maze, the pumpkin said, sobbing into his hands. My beautiful maze. You're a monster. Next time don't make such a confusing maze then, pointed out Ichigo. It was easier to break it than it was to solve it. I think you'll find those with a modicum of intelligence could have done it without such brutish methods, countered a black-haired man on Jura's team, pushing his glasses up as he spoke. But honestly, what else could be expected from the likes of a Kurosaki? Ichigo paused, looking at the man suspiciously. You know me. Of course. I must admit though, you could be worse when you consider who your father is. You know Ichigo? Asked Jura to the man next to him. You've never said anything. I saw no need to. The man glared at Ichigo before he began to walk off. Urayu Ishida. Remember the name of the man who will beat you Kurosaki. Jura sighed as he watched the man leave. I'm sorry about him Ichigo. Urayu is new so I'm not yet used to some of his quirks. He gave a nod to the rest of the fairy tale members before he led his team off. We will see you at the games. Who the hell was that guy? Muttered Shinji, still watching the back of Urayu in the distance. His magic seems familiar. And did he just call you Kuro dash? You lot. The pumpkin stared at them angrily. Destroying my beautiful maze, you're lucky I don't kick you out on the spot. Hey, protested Ichigo. You didn't say it wasn't allowed. I didn't did I? Murmured the pumpkin, crossing his arms in annoyance. All right, congratulations. Now get out of here before I change my mind. They wasted no time rushing away. As they left they saw the forms of rushing groups of mages, trying to use any pieces left of the maze to get there first. It looked like Sabretooth was going to make it next but it was done through the entire team riding on Renji's back, much to what appeared to be the man's displeasure. Looks like Sabretooth is next, muttered Mistogen, watching carefully. Be careful of them. I saw them last year. They are strong, there is no doubt about that. Like we'll let some overgrown cats beat us, said Laxus confidently. Aim for the top and nothing less. Let's take this tournament and give Fairy Tail an overwhelming win. Protector of the Fairies. The cloaked figure let out a sigh of relief as he managed to pull himself up to the top of the cliff face. Using magic would have made it so much easier but he couldn't afford to risk being discovered until he was done with his job. At the top of the hill he could see a girl waiting for him, wearing a black dress that stretched all the way down to knees. Come on Slowpoke. Easy for you to say, said the man as he adjusted the cloak around him and the hat he wore. Think they picked up on us? You mean do you think they picked up on you? There is no way they could pick up on me. You know what I mean. The girl shrugged. I suppose not. She leaned forward, pushing herself onto her tiptoes as she held a hand up her eyes as she looked towards the large building in the distance. No signs of anyone coming up to stop us. I think we've made it here unnoticed. Really? Well, that's a nice change. The man quickly started walking down the path towards the only structure in the nearby area. Constructed like a massive church, to most it would be a very impressive sight. He had seen better. What do we know about them? The girl tilted her head as she thought. The Zentopia Church is a mix of both religion and politics. Founded long ago, one of the most well-known of the cardinals, Will Neville, was the modern basis for all celestial spirit mages that followed afterwards. He himself was personally responsible for training a large number of the celestial spirit mages back then, though the ones with the Zodiac's keys were quite rare. Anything else? Yes. The man also wrote a book called The Key of the Starry Heavens, the second book of the two great myths. The same books that lead us here. The current leader. The girl shook her head. I was unable to find out anything when we were searching. His rank at least is the Archbishop, a title many use for his name at times too. He's the equivalent of a king for Zentopia. They have their own laws and customs, even their own army, and they are strong enough to be recognized as their own independent power. Their own independent army. The man froze as he stared across the distance between the two. He saw nothing but he kept focusing, increasing the intensity of his glare until he finally spotted it. Damn it. I knew it had been too easy. No way. You mean they actually still managed to sense you? After all the precautions we took. Why don't we ask them? You lot can come out now. How interesting, came another man's voice as he stepped forward towards the two, an illusion shattering around him. He had a large staff in one hand while armor plating covered his chest, shoulders, and wrists. You saw me, did you? That's impressive for a heretic. Name? I don't know, said the girl in annoyance. He's kept himself hidden extremely well. The man sighed. All right then. Who are you then? I'd prefer a name before I go past. Biro. Bureaucracy. The man's calm expression never faltered as he spoke. You have trespassed on holy ground. Leave now, else we will be forced to bestow on you righteous justice. You're showing mercy to me? I'm already on your land. You could legally attack me and do whatever you want. The law is in your favor. We are not so corrupt as to do such a thing, explained Biro, his expression still the same. We are just an honorable people. Well, that's good to see at least. The man shook his head as he took a step forward, knowing he was willingly provoking the man. Well, I'm sorry to bother you, but I really can't leave just yet. See, I need to have a few words with your archbishop. Biro tensed, his grip on his staff intensifying. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid you'll have to make an appointment. Our leader is very busy. I really don't have the time. The man vanished and Biro felt his calm facade break away as a hand patted him on the shoulder as he was passed. Don't worry, I'll let myself in. Biro spun round, swinging his staff at where the man was. Before it connected, however, the man vanished, reappearing behind the staff's path. Really? Is that all you can do? Biro rushed forward, his staff slamming down on a raised forearm before he heard the bones snap. The man's eyes widened in surprise as he jumped away, hiding his arm within the large cloak he wore. That magic. Nullification, right? I can't believe you actually nullified my own enhancements with that. Guess you aren't just any old guard that they sent out to stop me. I am the leader of the Legion Corps, Zentopia's finest warriors. We will not let you pass. We. That's right. Shouted a new voice as more illusions shattered. We're here to stop you. The man and the girl looked at the newcomer in surprise. Well, he's excitable, muttered the man. Calm down, Dan, said a large cat, its form similar to that of a human's with its size. A hat with the crest of the Zentopia Church rested on its head with a pair of glasses held up on that. A pair of white wings shot out of the cat's back as he stared at their enemy. Don't get caught out. The red-haired man, now identified as Dan, nodded briefly. His entire form was covered in a suit of armor like a knight, an image only intensified by the large round shield with the Zentopia Church's crest and the large spear he carried. Sorry, Samuel. Yo, came a third voice, the man it belonged to holding a wooden microphone. To the man and girl, he looked ridiculous, his hair gelled up into a long quiff while wearing a strange white outfit with tassels on the sleeves. Shall we get rid of him already? All threats must go, yeah. We should hear him out first, protested a young girl, her brown hair braided into a ponytail that fell in front of her. He might have a good reason to be here. Too merciful, Coco, said the finally newcomer, the woman brushing the white-dyed strands of hair out of her eyes towards the rest of her purple-colored hair. She reached for the belt at her waist before she pulled out a wooden hand with the index finger of it pointing forward. Sugar Boy is right. Let's just get rid of him. 6, huh? Is that all? What did you say? Demanded Dan. You looking down on us? Not at all. I'm certain you are all strong and powerful individuals. But you all won't be enough. We shall see, said Biro. Mary. Eliminate him. With pleasure, Mary replied, pointing the wooden tool she held at the man. First dash. She was cut off as the man's other fist slammed into her chest, sending her flying back against the rocks and hitting her head hard. She fell to the ground unconscious before the man kicked her magic tool away. Sorry, but I won't let you be the first to act. Mary. Sugar Boy slammed his microphone to the ground, singing into it as green mucus started to expel from all around him. Oh my hound dogs, come to my aid. Let's put on a show, yeah. The green slime shot at the man, but he quickly vanished, reappearing behind Sugar Boy and giving him a sharp chop on the back of his neck with the side of his hand. Next, the man said as Sugar Boy fell to the ground. He looked around to see the other four carefully observing him. Really? You aren't going to rush in like the others? Shame. It would have been faster. Coco, Samuel said. Plan R. Plan R. Yes. Plan R. Coco gave the cat a salute. Got it. The lights on the back of her sandals lit up as he began channeling magic through them. Time to run. Plan R. With a burst of speed, she shot forward, the ground cracking from her starting position. Her leg swung round in a fast kick that the man ducked under, Coco sliding further back as she slowed herself down to turn round. The moment she did so, however, the man was holding her off the ground by the back of her shirt. Come on now. Surely we can come to some arrangement here. I'd really like to avoid roughing you guys up any more than I already have. You don't get a choice in the matter, said Samuel as he stabbed at the man from behind. Purple energy burst from his claws and shot forward through the short distance between the two. In the brief space between the two, however, the attack didn't reach its target, the man twisting out of the way so it just flew right past him. Samuel looked on in shock to see the man had also made sure to pull Coco out of the way as well, saving her from being hit. He didn't have any time to think as Coco was suddenly sent flying at him, knocking the two down. The moment both tried to get up was the moment the man swiftly knocked the two of them out, twisting his body straight after as the point of a lance stabbed through the air beside him. You won't get away from us, stated Dan, holding up his shield to block the punch sent at him. The attack hit before the force behind it was redirected right back, the sound of bones cracking in the fist that the man had used. The man pulled back in surprise, looking between the shield and his fist. Was that? I see. Scared, are you? Now take this. Dan lunged forward again, his lance barely missing. His shield rose immediately to block the counter-attack he knew was coming before he felt the shield buckle and shatter in his grip, the fist slamming against his head and knocking him to the ground. A single punch to take down him too, commented Biro when he noticed Dan was still breathing. Did you anticipate his shield would take most of the blow? The man nodded, his hand hidden away beneath his cloak. Easiest way to break through a shield like that is to break it. But you have now lost your second hand because of that. That last swing broke the bones. Do you plan to fight me with both your arms useless? You should have faced us seriously when you had the chance. I'm at a disadvantage because I can't use my arms, you say. The man kicked at the ground in amusement. I've got two legs, don't I? And if they went, a good set of teeth. Your speed may be impressive, but it won't help you. Will it not? The man pulled back the cloak and Biro couldn't hide his shock as he saw both arms moving freely. That's not possible. They were broken. Were they now? I'm not sure I remember that. Are you sure you broke them? I know I dash. Biro forced himself to be quiet when the man rushed forward, his fist slamming against the staff. His nullification magic activated and he could hear the breaking of the man's bones, and yet he wasn't slowing down. Before he could even react, the man's other arm came up and slammed into his chest, making him stumble backwards where a sudden kick slammed into his head. He held out for a moment until another punch slammed into his stomach, his grip on his staff releasing as he fell down to the ground. Who are you? The man in front of him bent down before he moved a bit of the hat wrapped around his head, revealing a tuft of orange hair. No. But that's impossible. You're in Crocus. You can't have gotten here so fast. You'd be surprised, said Ichigo as he smirked at the man in front of him. Now then, is the Archbishop in? I'd quite like to have a few words with him. Protector of the Fairies. Hidden in plain sight. Well then, isn't this a surprise, said Ichigo as he sipped at the coffee placed in front of him. I never expected we'd end up meeting with you serving me coffee. I don't even like coffee, but I thought it would be amusing for this kind of situation. The Archbishop sat down opposite Ichigo nervously, holding his own cup with shaking hands. His face, however, showed years of experience of acting, not a single drop of fear appearing on that face or when he spoke. I'm glad you were willing to discuss this in a more civilized environment. Hey, you're the one who sent out that Legion Corps of yours. I was more than willing to sneak it and meet you privately, but you just had to get other people involved. Ichigo frowned as he placed the cup down. And you even tried to drug me too. Warning, don't bother trying to drug someone with high regenerative abilities. If they notice, then they'll just purge the infected systems and repair the damage. The Archbishop chuckled while he clenched his fists tighter around the fabric of his robe, his knuckles turning white. Ah, well dash. You don't have to bother explaining that to me. I wasn't sure you'd do it, but I had a little bird watching you just in case. Ichigo flinched as he shot a glance to his side, the Archbishop unsure of what he was doing. And apparently she doesn't like being called a little bird. She's so picky sometimes with what I call her. As I should be, said Mavis in protest. I refuse to be called a little bird like some nosy creature. You are nosy, muttered Ichigo in response before returning his attention to the Archbishop. Now then, where were we? Ah, I was curious to how you managed to have your elites ready for me. They were your elites, right? I mean, I assumed they were, but I expected stronger challengers. More on the level of what I presume the Rune Knight generals are at. It seems I must disappoint you then. While we have a lot of influence in our own forces, the generals the Magic Council has at its disposal are very formidable, much more so than my own forces. I figured. So how did you know I was coming? You are not the first to challenge us. You are just the first to get past the Legion Corps. The cliff face you climbed is actually in an awkward place for us. Our detection methods with magic aren't nearly as effective there as they are elsewhere. Therefore we make sure to keep a physical presence on site to keep an eye out and report if anything is amiss. You are good at hiding your presence, but only magically. Ichigo shook his head in annoyance. I should have been ready for that. Not much I can about it really, but I should have been prepared. It's an amateur's mistake. If you wouldn't mind getting to the heart of the matter, pressured the Archbishop, why are you here? I hardly see any reason for you to want to speak to someone like me. I hardly see any need for you to have any interest in you. You're right really, replied Ichigo, glancing around the room in interest as if looking for something. This room really is bland, you know. Is this really your office? Of course it is. Why else would I invite you in here? Maybe because you fear what I've come to find out. Ichigo smirked as he looked back at the Archbishop. The Zentopia Church was founded a long time ago. Why, it could be classified as a civilization in its own right. In fact, wouldn't that make it the only civilization to have managed to endure since 400 years ago? Even the original basis for the Magic Council that Genryusai Yamamoto helped create didn't get away unharmed, and it only really became a strong power in the past 100 years at the latest. Why else could guilds still fight one another 100 years ago? We did endure from that time, yes. But to say we came out of that time period unharmed is another story. Why, just look at what happened to the Nervits. They all perished except for a small tribe, and even they can no longer be found. Zeref's reign caused a lot of chaos. You blame Zeref? Well, it's a nice cover story for those who don't know about the stories of what happened back then. I mean, there was chaos, but if I'm correct, it was actually due to something called real nightmare. The Archbishop's cup fell from his grip, smashing against the ground. How? How do you? No one is meant to know about that. Did you erase the history of it all? Well, try as hard as you might, there is still one place your hands can never reach. The true events will at least remain in there for future generations. Ichigo pressed his palms together as he rested his elbows on his knees. Now then, on to business then. Real nightmare, also known as the infinity clock. I won't tell you anything. Such a device can't be let loose in the world again. You say that, but you've lost your composure, Archbishop. I can see the lies in your words. It's true, it should never be used as real nightmare again. The chaos would be catastrophic. But that doesn't mean it can't be used in other ways. 6 pieces, all scattered. If brought together, it forms the infinity clock. But what if they were assembled in a different way? The Archbishop stood up in anger. If you know all this, then why are you here? What do you want? Confirmation. Confirmation that I was right. Confirmation that such an idea was possible. Confirmation that you just gave me. The Archbishop sighed in defeat as he sat back down. I'll admit it. The pieces of the infinity clock were gathered years ago for a new purpose. The magic, real nightmare, is capable of greatly distorting the perception of time for people. It's how it drove them to madness and created chaos. While small, there is a trace of time magic buried within its core. It's why it is called the infinity clock. And I'm sure you know how valuable time magic can be to some people, especially to those on the West Continent, though they'd want any form of magic if it was rare enough to be perfectly honest. You actually have information on the West Continent? Surprising. There isn't even info on them in the place I've been bar a single name. But that's not why I'm here. There is a far more pressing matter. Where is the infinity clock now? And if I tell you, what will you do? Figure out why it's being used. Understand what is being planned. And, if necessary, stop them before they use it. The Archbishop let out a laugh. You'll stop it? That would be treason, you realize. The Archbishop froze as he saw the smirk on Ichigo's face widen. Thank you, said Ichigo as he got out of his seat. That's all the information I need. Hold on dash. There is no point now. I have what I want and you have nothing to barter with to stall for time. Those reinforcements of yours are still 5 minutes away at least. They won't be able to stop me leaving, and even if they were here it would be the same. Getting to you was meant to be the hard part if I wanted to have time to speak to you. Leaving is easy. Ichigo spun round as he drew both blades, slashing at the wall and tearing a hole through it from the force of his swings. Both blades slid back into their sheaths as Ichigo leaned out of the hole and took a step forward onto the air. I thank you for your hospitality, Archbishop. Maybe next time we should have drinks without all the threats. Taking off, Ichigo was gone in a second, already speeding away. He glanced at the time before nodding to Mavis as she hung off his shoulder. Looks like we have just enough time. Better hurry. Don't want to give the game away just yet. Protector of the Fairies. Hurry up, Ichigo. Called Levi as she banged on Ichigo's door, a few pieces of toast held in her hand as she hurried to eat something before the day's events truly began. Hurry up and wake up or you'll miss the opening ceremony. He's not in there, said Nozomi as she passed her in the hall. He went out right after you all got back last night. And you're telling us all this now? Levi sighed. You didn't ask where he was going, did you? The prince's actions and decisions are none of my business. It would be rude to ask knowing this. In a time like this it is kind of important if we know where everyone else is. Even if he wants some privacy, he should at least let us know if he is going to be out from so late till now. Do you want me to look for him? I can probably find him easily enough with my magic. If you wouldn't mind. Levi watched as the portal opened by Nozomi's side. I have to ask, what kind of magic is that? I've never seen anything like it. Nozomi frowned. I've never been too sure. I believe part of it was influenced by my own power from Edelas and that's how it came to be. It's far stronger than then, however, and the closest magic I have come to relate it with is one called territory. The only difference between the two is mine is slower and less flexibly but has a few more powerful abilities in exchange for all of that. That's useful, I suppose. So is Ichigo through here? Levi stuck her head through to see the portal was floating above the entrance of the inn, Ichigo about to walk through. He looked up at her with a sheepish expression on his face before raising a hand in a mock wave. Hey Levi! Don't you hate me? Levi exclaimed angrily. Where have you been? The opening ceremony is about to begin. We need to hurry. All right already, said Ichigo, but Levi had already pulled her head back through and the portal had shut. A moment later Levi had slammed open the door and was grabbing his hand, dragging him along. Come on already. Everyone else went ahead. Hold on a sec. At least let me get something to eat. A piece of toast was shoved into his mouth, causing him to almost choke as he rushed to eat and swallow it. Hey. You wanted to eat something. You have no right to complain now. Ichigo dropped his shoulders in defeat. Fine already. You can let go now. And risk you running off again? No way. Ichigo frowned. Are you still mad at me for leaving without saying anything? Mad? Why would I be? It's not like you did the same last time. It's not like I wasn't expecting a similar wait if you didn't show up today. Levi dash. Let's just go already, Levi muttered. I just want you to promise me you'll stop doing this all the time. If it's important, can't you at least trust us a bit? It wasn't anything that important, Levi. You suck at lying, Ichigo. Isn't that why you always try and tell some variation of the truth? Levy shook her head. At least say you are going next time. No one likes it when you vanish without a word. There are people waiting here for you after all. I'll try, said Ichigo, trying to reassure her. He looked at a passing clock before his eyes widened. We're that late. Yes. That's why we need to rush. Hold on, said Ichigo as he scooped her up, much to Levy's embarrassment. Hey. Put me down. This is faster, explained Ichigo as he shot forward, taking to the skies and using his magic to accelerate them faster towards Domus Flaw. They could see the stadium in the distance growing bigger as they approached. They hadn't had time to look at it properly last night, but it was far more impressive than it had first appeared. From their height they could see it had a large circular arena in the center of it all with seats all around it, people spilling into the stadium in the thousands. There had to be thousands and thousands of people arriving to watch from the look of it. Like a compass as well, a marker was at each major position. 4 statues stood there, one at each point. He recognized them all. Those were the statues of the 4 gods of Ishgar. Ah! Called out Levy as she pointed down at the ground. There's the others. Ichigo nodded as he shot down, landing softly in front of the group before gently setting Levy down. He looked at the others sheepishly before scratching the back of his head. Sorry I'm late. I lost track of time. Let's hurry up at least, said Laxus as he noticed the time. They start introducing people any minute now. Ichigo nodded as they all rushed through the stadium, passing through the checkpoints set up without anyone stopping them. They arrived at the room that had been allocated to them before waiting patiently inside, a screen hovering in one corner of the room to show the current events happening outside. They didn't know who most of the other teams were or who they necessarily had, only that their other team they had passed along with Lamia Scale and Sabretooth. Finally, after 10 minutes of waiting, the pumpkin they saw last night appeared on the screen in the center of the arena. Welcome all, the pumpkin started off saying, to the Grand Magic Games. I'm sure many of you all remember me, but, for all you newcomers out there who get to see the events first or second hand, I will introduce myself. My name is Mato and I'll be the referee for the duration of the games. A mass amount of balloons burst out of smoke as Mato finished speaking, the pumpkin seeming to enjoy the screams of excitement from the people around him. Mato pointed up towards the stands where a small booth could be seen, a panel of 3 announcers sitting in the seats. Hello, said a black-haired man with an extremely smooth face. I'm your announcer, Chapati Lola. Next to me is a man I'm sure you'll all familiar with. Let me introduce to you Lahar, the right-hand man of the magic chairman himself. The cheers subdued a bit, but the crowd was filled with too many people who didn't understand the seriousness Lahar's presence created. Only the mages watching did. It's a pleasure to be here, Chapati, Lahar said politely. Hopefully this will be the most exciting games this year. Thank you, Lahar. And now, our third co-star is the lovely Miss Fiore, Jenny Real-Eyed of Blue Pegasus. The blonde-haired beauty in question gave a light cheer, but everyone could tell she was depressed about something. Suddenly the chances Blue Pegasus had of being in the games dropped significantly. Now then, said Chapati as he drew attention back to himself, let's start with the preliminary round's 8th place team. A shocking turn of events compared to previous years, the Wild Dogs of Fiore barely made it in. Introducing the mages of Quattro Cerberus, we have the return of the usual trio. Rocker, Seams and Jaeger. And it seems now that Bacchus has joined in too. The mages slowly started entering, Rocker waving at the crowd before going back to zipping up his biker-like jacket. A spiked dog collar went around his neck while his hair was spiked into 2 large tufts pointing upwards. Jaeger meanwhile stood in confidently, a similar spiked collar around his neck too. He didn't bother wearing anything on his upper body, inside flexing his muscles at the crowd and making a few more people cry out in excitement. Seams meanwhile acted a bit more like the Joker of the lot, letting the bells on the side of his hood ring out as he rose a hand triumphantly. His whole face had been covered in war paint, his way of showing he was ready for anything ahead. In his hand he held a large flag with Quattro Cerberus's guild mark on. Behind them however was Bacchus, leaning to one side as he walked and darting unevenly from side to side. A small bottle was in his hand which showed he had already started drinking, but the cheers still rose as they saw him. His reputation was still a large one after all. His hair was pulled up into a bun behind the back of his head while blue armored plates covered his shoulders and neck, the only thing present on his upper body as well. Finally, we have the newcomer making a stir. The demon hiding in human skin, the monster with inhuman strength, Kenpei's Araki. The man in question appeared with a large smirk on his face, as if in anticipation for the fights to come. He wore nothing on his upper body, which revealed a muscular chest to everyone, along with a large scar running down the right side of his chest. The rest of his attire seemed to resemble a Shinigami, with the lower half of himself being cloaked with a Shiakushou. Long messy black hair stretched down past the man's shoulders and a large scar went down the man's face over his left eye. "Yay!" called a child's voice from the ground, a small pink-haired child leaning over the edge of the barrier that separated the crowd from the contests. She raised her hands up as she waved at Kenpei joyfully. "Go Kenny!" Chapati waited until the cheers started to calm down before he took back control of the audience. "Now then, let's move on to our next team. They failed at each hurdle year after year, but finally they take center stage. The ravens that fly through the night, the hunters preying on their enemies, I give you the mages of Raven Tail. Alexei, the masked knight, Kaname-tuan, the blind swordsman, Kurahibi, the copycat, Obra, the one I really don't know what to say about, and finally Flare Corona, the flame-haired woman." The excitement of the crowd wasn't nearly as high as it was for Quattro Cerberus, but there was still a fair amount of cheers. Every member of Fairy Tail and the other guilds who knew what Raven Tail was like watched on in anger, especially as the mages entered the field as if they owed it. Alexei led the group holding their flag, the masked knight being exactly as the name expected. He wore a set of golden armor including a helmet, a large cloak wrapped around his shoulders with the crest of Raven Tail on its back. A dark-skinned man walked behind him, most identifying him as Kaname from his position in the order. Despite his blindness, the man was confident in every step that he took. A white brand-like visor covered his eyes while an orange scarf was wrapped around his neck. Long braids rested around the sides of his head and down behind him, coming to rest on the long white jacket he wore that extended down to his knees, the arms left bare. Black trousers and arm guards completed his attire, along with a sword resting against his left side through use of a small string. Most didn't see it as much, but every Shinigami and Quincy knew what the blade was as they watched the screen. A Zanpakuto. Kurahibi followed behind those two, dressed in black including black eyeliner around his eyes. His eyes looked almost like those of a snake's with their slanted appearance, the theme being carried down by the way he seemed to act as he walked and watched everyone. Obra was right by his side, looking almost like a puppet. The mask he wore had an almost mechanical look to it with its blue skin, while the gloves the man wore made it look like he had no hands at all. A large poncho-like cape hid away most of the man's body, while a small creature seemed to move between the man's shoulder and the top hat he wore. The creature itself seemed extremely unusual to all who saw it, wearing a small cape and having a crown of leaves wrapped around its head. The final of the group was Flare, the woman looking more nervous to be there than any of the others. If anyone looked at her, even a glance would be able to tell what color she liked. From her red hair, tied back behind her in braids, to her red dress to even her red shoes. The dress itself was extremely low-cutting, exposing a lot of skin especially on her back and sides, and long red gloves reached up towards her shoulders, stopping just short of the X-shaped scar on her shoulder. Despite her appearance, however, many people were drawn back up to the deranged expression on her face and the visible bags under her eyes. Chapati noticed the turning of the crowd before quickly acted. Now then, in number 6th. The beautiful mermaids that dance in the sea, the mages of the only all-female guild in all of Fiori, here they are. The mages of Mermaid Heel. Starting with the woman who has yet to even unsheath her blade, Kagura Mikazuchi. The cheers had already started before Chapati had finished speaking, and he had to struggle to be heard as the black-haired girl started to enter the stadium, carrying a sword by her side with a seal around its hilt. Her attire consisted of smartly dressed clothing, a white blazer with a gold lining worn over it all. The others of the guild were quick to follow their leader, and Chapati quickly spoke into the microphone as they all entered. It seems Arana Webb has returned to us again this year. She's quite well known for her spider-like qualities, and she'll ensnare anyone unlucky enough to get caught in her path. The green-haired woman in question rose a hand and waved, her other being used to hold the flag. Large spider web designs covered her mustard-colored suit while her hair was gathering into massive dreadlock-like curls, almost like the cocooned creations a spider might make. We can't forget one of the guild's newcomers. A wielder of the stars, meet Yukino Aguria. The girl gave a wave to the crowd as she heard her name being called. Her hair was an unusual shade, being a pale blue which was noticed a lot more by the darker blue rose in her hair. Around her was a large cloak, feathery protrusion attached around the neck of it while the ends of the cloak were pulled into ribbons. But that's not all. Mermaid Heel feels confident in their rookies this year. Not one, not two, but three newcomers. You know the last two through their father, but now they step out of that shadow. The Quincy and Shinigami twins, Yuzo and Karen Kurosaki. The twins waved at the crowds with large smiles, trying to ignore the cries of his hind from the crowds as he held up a large banner with their names on and waved it around. The fairy tale mages watched before Shinji looked towards Ichigo, seeing his eyes locked on the screen, not even blinking. "I'd forgotten, you know," he muttered. "I didn't realize it, but all those years meant they had both grown up. They look well." The cheers slowly died down and Chapati spoke once again. "I am required to say legally they are allowed in this tournament. The Dark Guild that creates chaos, the return of mages from years past, the members of Fairy Tale. The Fiery Salamander, the Child of the Sky, the Maker of Ice, the One-Woman Army, and the Mage of the Zodiac." The crowd was very quiet as Natsu and the others walked out. Wendy gripped her staff tightly in nervousness while Urza stared at the whole crowd, the flag being leaned against her side as she stopped. Gray didn't even look up at them, his fists clenched as he stared at the ground. Lucy tried to chuckle but it came out dryly. The first signs of cheering came from Fairy Tale itself. Every single member of the guild tried to make up for the silence by calling out as loud as they could. A few hesitant members of the audience joined in before a small polite set of clapping began. Realizing that was all Fairy Tale would get, Chapati moved on. "Now then, our next team is at place number 4. The Knights that protect the king, serving his will and now providing entertainment for us all. Please welcome the Garu Knights." Small cheers broke out. Most of the people there were unsure of the whole the Garu Knights were as a whole and were unaware of their role as executioners. Anyone who did though looked at the 5 mages suspiciously. There was no reason for them to be participating, so why were they? "Not many left now," said Chapati. In a surprising turn of events, Team 3 this year is someone we never expected to come in it. The cats that took the world by storm, the guild that reached the top last year, please welcome the mages of Sabretooth. The mages sprinted in, holding their fists up as they fanned up the crowds. The man who won it all for them last year, Renji Abarai. Renji raised his fist up again, the cheers increasing. He had covered up the tattoos on his head with a large bandana while dark straps covered the tattoos on his arms. He held Sabretooth's flag and raised it higher for all to see, laughing as the cheers increased further. "Give it up for the twin dragons of Sabretooth as well," called out Chapati, giving the audience more of what they wanted to hear. "Sting Cliff and Rogue Cheney." The 2 dragon slayers smiled at audience, Sting's possessing a lot more cheer and arrogance as he raised both hands. "Don't forget Sabretooth's powerhouse mage, Orgon Anagir." The large man roared up at the grounds, raising both muscular hands upwards. Most of his upper body was left bare except for a pair of basic arm guards, a large piece of cloth wrapped around his waist almost like a shirt over his trousers. Long shoulder-length green hair was held back by a black hairband, the only thing stopping it from going all over the place. Finally, the minstrel who sings to the red moon. Rufus Lore. The blonde-haired man brushed a strand of his hair back behind him, letting it fall behind his back. A large cowboy hat rested on his head with a large set of pink feathers covering the ponytail under it. Every part of his appearance screamed about his flamboyant personality, and Ichigo could see Levi growling in annoyance as she was reminded of Rusty Rose, only worse. A red mask settled on his face, gold trimmings on it like the rest of his matching attire. "Our turn's coming up," said Miss Doggan as he noticed the screen go black. He grabbed the flag before they hurried to the entrance they had to enter from, hearing the crowds dying down as Chapati went to speak. In a surprise turn of events, it seems 2 teams from one guild made it through. You know them, you might hate them, but no one can deny they are skilled to have 2 teams make it this far. Chapati was interrupted as Mato stole the microphone, shouting into it. They also ruined my beautiful maze. Chapati patted the mascot/referee on the head reassuringly as he took the microphone back. Fairy Tale Team B. Here they are, causing a stir. The word priestess, Levy McGarden. The man who destroyed the Magic Council 7 years ago, Mist Ogden. The man who... Chapati paused as he looked down at a sheet of paper. Actually, we don't have much on this guy. The visored, Shinji Hirako. The previously expelled member of Fairy Tale, Laxastriar. And finally, the revived Wizard Saint, though that title may be void now, Ichigo Kurosaki. The last word came out as pure shock to Chapati, utterly confused as he read the last name, and that was shared by many of the mages present. They used that time to make their entrance. Shinji smirked at the quiet crowds. Man, they really don't give us much to work with, he said, even as the other members of Fairy Tale began cheering. Mist Ogden nodded before he paused, feeling like someone was watching him. He turned towards the source only to see Kagura looking at him with pure fury in her eyes, her hands struggling to not draw her sword there and then. She looked like she wanted to kill him, which made him wonder what exactly he did to deserve such hatred. It was probably related to his memories that he refused to accept if he had to take a guess, but that could count as the reason a lot of people hated him, to be honest. It seems, said Chapati as he managed to recover from the shock, that many people outside of the guilds were unaware of the second guild rule. It is new this year on a trial run to see how the games turn out. Hopefully you all will enjoy it because of this. Ichigo glanced around before he spotted Yuzu and Karen. Yuzu was looking at him with her eyes wide, shocked white. It even looked like there were tears in her eyes that she had yet to try and wipe away. Karen, well, she was similar for a moment. Then it was like a switch was flicked and her expression turned to anger, rushing forward with her fist cocked back. You bastard! Ichigo's eyes widened in shock as he dodged the punch she sent at him. Hey! What's the big idea, Karen? I mean, I know I haven't been around much, but well, actually I can kind of see why you'll met, but 7 years of that all weren't completely my fault. Shut up. You aren't him. There's no way you're him. Karen pointed at him accursedly before turning to Ishine in the audience. He's a filthy liar, right Dad? What the hell are you doing? Ishine paused before looking at the second flag he was waving, this one saying, Go Ichigo, on it. He reached down under his seat before pulling out a megaphone, making Karen cringe. Oh God, he's not going to dash. Don't worry, my darling daughter. Daddy loves you just as much as all his other children. He's gotten worse, muttered Ichigo as he stared up at his father, Karen hearing a trace of fondness in his voice before she tried to ignore it again. She snarled at him before kicking him in the shin and sending a glare at the announcer as if daring him to tell her off. Kagura gave her a harsh glare when she returned to the others while Yuzu still looked shocked, unsure of what to say or do. Now then, said Chapati, the chaos finally over. The last team, placing number 1 in the preliminaries. Let's welcome team number 1. The goddess of love and war's sacred destroyers, the home of many strong mages known all around, let's welcome Lamia Scale. First of we have the married ice and water duo of the guild, Leon and Juvia Vastia. Juvia and Leon walked out, holding the flag between them and waving. Juvia shot a worried glance towards the stands where Lamia Scale was before calming down as she saw her watching happily from the guild master's arms, her panic disappearing. Next we have Kelia Blendy, Lamia Scale's own klutzy mage. Why is that my nickname? Kelia asked quietly to herself as she walked out, immediately tripping on a small rock and falling flat on her face. Ow. Never mind. Honestly, said Urayu as he walked out after her before picking her up with the back of her top. You are hopeless, aren't you? There he is. Exclaimed Chapati, getting the crowd to cheer louder. The Quincy dazzling all with his skill. Urayu Ishida. The man shook his head at the announcer's words in annoyance, instead making sure his mantle was properly in place and that the rest of his white Quincy uniform was presentable still, a few blue strips in key areas of the clothes. Finally, the man you've all been waiting for. Seen as the strongest mage after the 4 gods of Ishgar, the man who leads Lamia Scale to countless victories in missions and battles alike. The unmovable object, Juraniki's Chapati let out a sign of relief as he finished, making sure the microphone was covered so no one heard it. The list he had to go through was ridiculously long, but at least now he had a moment to relax as the crowd's cheers became unstoppable. Eventually they slowly started dying down and he took it as his opportunity to speak again. Now then, let's get to the games. A large slab of rock burst out of the ground, cameras focusing on the inscriptions in it so all members of the audience both there and around Fiore would be able to read it. The program of the games has been unveiled for all to see. Days 1 to 4 will include 2 events. One kept secret, the other a guaranteed battle. And as for Day 5, you'll just have to be patient and wait and see. A second slab rose, this one with ranks and points on it. The normal events have 8 places available. 10 points for first place, 8 for second, 6 for third, 4 for fourth, 3 for fifth, 2 for sixth, 1 for seventh, and 0 for eighth. Any mage can be selected for this round. It's all up to the teams themselves. The battles afterwards are depending on both your votes and the decisions of the organizers. That's right, you have the ability to influence the events to come. If the team wins, they get 10 points. The loser of course ends up with 0, however both teams can end up with 5 points if they draw. Simple, right? Chapati brought back attention to the first slab as he spoke again. As it is Day 1, the first event has been revealed to you all. Hidden. What does this mean, you may ask? You will find out shortly. First 8 mages must be selected. Teams, choose your participant and have the rest of you retreat to the designation areas. We've provided you all with clear views, so ensure you take the time to study your opponents. We want to see the best fights possible later on after all. Hidden huh? Muttered Urza. I think I want to try. You sure, Urza? Asked Gray. I'm sure. I might as well start this all off. It seems Fairy Tale A is going with Urza Scarlet. Called out Chapati as the others started retreating. I'll go too. Exclaimed Jaeger. Leave this to me, guys. I'll start us off if I can, Kagura, said Arana. I'll make sure they know not to underestimate us. Do your best. Can aim, said Alexei. You go. The blind man nodded. Yes, sir. Oh. Said Chapati in excitement. It seems Raventail is really not holding anything back from the start. We can't hold back either, said Rufus as he stepped forward. I'll handle this all. I'll go too, said Levi, glaring at Rufus. I can handle this. Incredible! Exclaimed Chapati. Both the minstrel and the word priestess are joining in. Looks like the first round will be more exciting than we previously anticipated. All that is left is Lamia Scale and the Garu Knights. Kama simply stepped forward, no words being exchanged with his team. Looks like they have made their choice. Kelia was about to recommend herself when Uriah stepped forward. I'll do it. Jura gave a nod before the rest of them left, leaving the field empty of all but the 8 participants in Motto, the referee having returned now all the teams had been introduced. Ah, said Chapati, leaning over to one side as a person approached him wearing official robes. The man whispered into his ear before Chapati pulled back and returned to the microphone. I have just been informed that the first task is ready. Even we announcers are unsure of what it might be. Chapati turned to Lahar curiously. What do you think about all this, Lahar? Anyone you think we should watch out for? Lahar placed his elbows on the table as he leaned forward, pressing his hands together in interest. Rufus is certainly a capable mage, but so is everyone else. Personally, I'm curious to see what the blind swordsman is capable of. Very good. And you, Jenny? Me? I'll have to go for Uriah. I've met him a few times and he's definitely strong. It's time to begin. Cried out Motto. Kabo. All around the arena rose large runes, all joining together and constructing a massive city all around them. The 8 mages quickly found themselves being separated as teleportation runes caught them and transported them elsewhere, appearing in constructed areas of the town being built. Creating a city? Asked Mistogan as he stared at the constructing city from the stands. How much magical power would you even need to build such a thing so quickly? A lot, muttered Ichigo, leaning over the edge with Mistogan. A normal mage would never be able to do this alone. Alright everyone, called out Chapati. The stage is almost set. All the participants don't know where each other is and I've received the rules right now. This is a large-scale game of hide and seek. You are all it and must find each other. Land one hit on your opponents and you will gain a point. At the same time, they will lose a point. Images flashed past all the mages before blurred figures began appearing. They slowly became more and more solid before they became identical copies of all the mages participating. These copies will help you hide. Attack the wrong target and you will lose a point. Be warned. Even a single touch of these copies will cause them to fade away and for you to lose a point. When you are hit or lose a point, you will vanish and return to the city in a different area 10 seconds later. There are 30 minutes. Until then, fight and hide. Begin. Levy looked around at all the copies around her, carefully watching how they moved. She probably had a bit of time. This stadium was large. It was almost as big as a small city itself. With that being the case, she'd probably have at least a minute till someone nearer her as she doubted they would be separated too much from each other. The audience wanted to see a show after all. She started moving, tapping her fingers along her staff as she walked. It wasn't as fast as using both hands but it might be less noticeable than making the obvious signs. The tricky part would be in identifying who was real and who wasn't. She wasn't a brilliant censor by any means compared to the dedicated ones. She could tell all these copies had a magical signature to them but there was so many she doubted she could tell the difference between them and the original. Others would be able to tell the difference, she was sure of it. Definitely at least Urayu Ishida. The announcer had called him a Quincy, and she did know briefly that they had amazing control over magic. Sensing them all might be child's play to him but then that was again debatable. The other who bothered her was Kaname Tuzan. He was blind, and yet he could walk as he did as if he could see. She somehow doubted he would be fooled by any copy. She felt the sensation of her magic finishing its spell and she let it go to work, the words flying in front of her and slowly forming a clone of herself. Not much power to it but it wasn't one of the default clones. It would draw a few shots in the early stages. She felt the hairs on the back of neck stand on end, her eyes flickering towards a copy of the mage from the Garu Knights. It was such a subtle movement but she realized instantly that she had made a mistake in front of this clone, the clone suddenly charging her as he ripped a scythe from his back and swiped at her. How? She had only moved her eyes. How had he spotted her so easily? The blade sliced right through the air and she could feel it almost hit her throat. This man, he had naturally gone for the kill strike there. Her foot hadn't even hit the ground from taking the step backwards when the clone of herself stuck out, just fast enough to apply a light touch to the man. That was enough. The man grunted in annoyance as he vanished, a point being lost to her. Their fight however had the disadvantage of drawing others towards her position. She barely had time to think when Jaeger rushed round the corner, spotting her clone and trapping it in a large flytrap that burst from the ground. Levy held back her surprise, using the advantage she had just been given. He hadn't seen that she had a clone. He thought he got the real her, and it would only take a second to realize that nothing was happening. Solid script, fire. It was basic but it did the job, a large burst of flames blasting at Jaeger. Without the need for power, she could save time and simply fire at the man, his body far too big to make any fancy maneuvers in dodging. Incredible! Exclaimed Chapati from his position in the stands. Fairy Tale B's Levy has already gained 2 points. You left yourself exposed, said Uriah's voice from behind her, an arrow slamming into her before she could even turn. Her vision went black for 10 seconds as she felt herself getting transported somewhere. Her vision finally cleared and she found herself away from her previous position. Judging by the sounds however, she hadn't been taken too far from the battlefield. She had to get another clone made quickly. She didn't bother with hiding it just time. She had to act instantly. She could hear the announcer stating points as things happened. Arana got taken down by Kaname suddenly while Urza managed to score a single hit on Uriah and gain a point. With her clone prepared, she moved forward, using her clone as a scout. It drew out an enemy perfectly, Jaeger going for it again. He was interrupted by a sudden attack from Arana as she shot a bunch of webbing at him, stealing the point before moving on to her. Well, it would have been her, but she had also fallen for her clone, Arana, taking a blast to her back from some lightning when she was distracted. She quickly moved as she saw a glint of metal, one of the clones of Urza turning out to be the real one. So that's your plan, Levi. You're creating fake clones. And you're using telekinesis, said Levi as she dodged the swords that shot at her from the side. Her eyes widened as she saw Kama moving from behind Urza. Look out! Urza spun round, the blade in her hand blocking the scythe from Kama. She looked at in surprise when she realized she was blocking a large hand on the back of the scythe, suddenly being hit by a hand from the other scythe. Levi watched as Urza vanished and Kama moved onto her, swiftly jumping back as he swung at her. He kept up his assault for a few seconds, not giving her a chance to get a hit in. As her back hit the wall, Kama swung at her again, the blade barely missing her as she leaped up. She let out a sigh of relief as her foot brushed against Kama as she passed, watching him vanish. Never had she been so glad to have a word like jump come so naturally to her when she wanted it. There was no time to relax, however. Her trick was over now that at least 3 people knew about it, and another 2 wouldn't be fooled for long. Abandoning the clone, she made sure she blended in well in the crowd. She could see Uriu up ahead, facing off against Kaname as both shot around at fast speeds. Kaname was just being kept at range by Uriu's accurate shots, a small metal bow being held in his hand. The blue arrow projectiles, however, were being deflected by the other man's Zanpakuto, and it didn't look like any would get a hit in soon with the way things were going. She couldn't resist. With how distracted Uriu was, he didn't even notice her in the crowd. He was just passing her when his eyes widened as his head turned towards her, and she was surprised he had even managed to sense her with how focused he was in his fight. It was too late, however, her staff tapping against him as he passed and having him disappear. With Uriu gone, however, Kaname was free to focus on her. His head turned straight towards her before he appeared before her, his sword already slashing down at her. She dodged back, but she felt it leave a small cut on her arm, her vision going black as he already started to turn. She waited until she was able to see again when she rushed back into the game. The first person she was about to attack happened to be Urza until a scythe flew through the air and slammed into Urza's back, the woman opening her mouth in surprise, and Levi couldn't stop the gasp that escaped her lips as she saw some of the blood that hit the floor before Urza vanished. That worry turned to anger as she saw Kama jumping up from another street to stand on a nearby roof, his scythe flying back towards him. She didn't get much time to do anything, however, when a bright light filled the sky, revealing Rufus standing on the air. "You all are so boring down there," he muttered, waving his hands out to his side. "Your footsteps, you heartbeat, I have memorized them all. This is no long a game any of you can win." He raised his hands towards his head before extending the index and middle fingers towards his temple. Behind him extended swirling spirals from a magic circle, intertwining with one another. "Memory make, a night of falling stars." Light burst out from Rufus' body before firing at every mage present in the arena. Levi was unable to escape, and she wasn't the only one, only Uriu and Kaname fast enough to dodge at the last second. In a second, Rufus had taken out 5 of them, and with ease too. "Ah, I have to thank you for showing me such a pleasant memory," added Rufus as an arrow shot through him. His body wavered and vanished, leaving the mage gone, and yet his voice still remained. "I never imagined I'd be able to copy a Quincy's ability to walk on the air. It's a very useful memory that I'll make sure to treasure." Uriu turned, releasing an arrow suddenly at a point in the air. Kaname interrupted the path of the arrow, however, slicing through it and hitting Rufus in the process, the man's form appearing for a second before he vanished, shock briefly shown on his face. "You can hide all you want," said Kaname. "You cannot hide from someone who sees past your illusions." Levi saw all the sudden conflict from the ground, choosing that moment to fire a blast upwards before moving quickly. Uriu dodged, but that distraction was built upon by others firing upwards, enough making him lose focus that Kaname managed to scratch him. Pausing and hiding, Levi quickly glanced around for a clock of some kind. She looked at it only to see there was still 20 minutes left. This game was going to get long. Protector of the Fairies. Words of light in a soul of ice. "And it's over," cried out Chapati as a large bell rang out throughout the arena. One by one, the buildings around them started to fade away, breaking down into sparks of light as it revealed all the participants to one another once again. Let's tally up the scores. Levy's eyes shot upwards as a large screen appeared above them all, a brief bit of fear running through her. Desperately looking to see if she could spot how many points she had gotten, she could only hope she had done as well as she believed she had. She had a rough idea originally, but after a while she had lost count. Gaining points was easy, but hanging onto them was infinitely harder. Finally the screen cleared, however, and she could see them all. First, Raventail, 10p. Second, Sabertooth, 8p. Third, Fairytail B, 6p. Fourth, Lamia Scale, 4p. Fifth, Garu Knights, 3p. Sixth, Mermaid Heel, 2p. Seventh, Fairytail A, 1p. Eighth, Quattro Cerberus, 0p. Levy frowned as she looked at the scores. Urza had scored lower than she should have. What happened? And what happened with Uriah? He seemed to have dropped down a bit more than he should have. To be honest, she had been expected for him to jump ahead of her. Thank you all, said Chapati. We now move on to the battle portion of today's events. The form is quite simple. 4 1v1s, each following the other. Because of how little time there was today, the matchups have been decided quickly by the organizers, taking the small amounts of votes we got in as a reference. Make sure you vote now for tomorrow if you want to see certain participants fight one another. Chapati took a look down at the sheet in front of him before he chuckled. Well, it seems we have got 2 unlucky ones here. The first match of day 1 is between Levy McGarden and Rufus Lore. Such a shame, really. After all that, neither even has time to rest. Glanced at Rufus curiously, Levy tried to judge the condition the saber-tooth mage was in. He was trying to hide how he felt from the look of it, but it was probably going just as well as it was for her. Non-stop action for 30 minutes, dodging mages who were extremely fast or extremely deadly. No one had gotten a break during that event. Now then, said Chapati urgently. If I could have everyone else return to their teams, then we can begin. Watching them all go, Levy gripped her staff nervously. Her enemy was a tough one, as much as she hated to admit it considering how much he annoyed her. And she wasn't someone with a lot of magical power, though Second Origin had really helped increase those reserves of hers. Luckily nothing was after this, which meant she could use every last drop if she needed to. How interesting, said Rufus as he walked towards the area opposite her. Fighting against one another so soon. It must be fate, mademoiselle. We'll see if you find things so amusing once you've lost, stated Levy, reading her staff and looking towards the pumpkin. Mato held up a hand before he suddenly started taking steps back to get out of the arena. You have 30 minutes. Begin. Levy jumped back, pausing as she saw Rufus not even moving. What are you doing? Oh, don't worry. You can go first. Was he mocking her? No, he wasn't being arrogant here. He wanted her to move first. If he didn't act first, she'd be forced to whether she wanted to or not. Let's start off easy then, she muttered. Solid script combo, wait and jump. The words attached to her armor and boots as she rushed forward, another spell around being created. Solid script, lightning. Rufus chuckled before the lightning shooting of the staff before piecing his body, causing it to wavier and fade away. Levy looked around for the real version of him, finding herself surrounded by a whole group of them. Solid script magic, is it? I think I remember you saying that. Such lovely magic, and a very annoying one to memorize completely. Levy glanced at all the clones. Which the hell is the real you? Any of them could be. Or none of them. Or maybe they are all me. They are the memories of me being there after all. Levy frowned before she spun her staff around, pointing it at the ground. Solid script, shake. A large bust of magic shot down her staff and impacted against the ground, causing all the clones to stumble and fade away easily. Levy smirked. They weren't so bad to deal with if they were that weak. She just had to find the original. Excellent, just as I expected. But still, not enough. More clones appeared around the arena, Levy smirking. This old trick? That's boring by this point. To prove her point, she spun her staff over her head. Sold script, wind slash. The word flew up to the staff, wind cycling around the staff as it did so, before thick slashes of the wind shot outwards from the top. It didn't take any effort with how much magic was necessary to defeat the copies. Her eyes shot towards a small patch of blood that hit the ground beside her, and she didn't hesitate, slamming the staff down towards where the blood should have fallen from. Solid script, iron. Rufus's invisibility shattered as he abandoned any efforts at being sneaky, barely dodging the reinforced wood of the staff that caused the ground to crack in the process. "Don't bother even hiding," said Levy, pointing at his arm where a faint trail of blood could be seen. "You got careless, Rufus." Rufus looked down at his arm in annoyance. "So I did. Such a shame. I was hoping to be able to observe you for a tiny bit longer." "Too late now," said Levy as she jumped away. Rufus wondered what on earth she was doing under he saw the rapid movements of her free hand along, her fingers tabbing and making tiny motions with her other hand as it gripped the staff tightly. All around him spun the word for lightning, trapping him on all sides as bars of the word iron sprung up. The attack wasn't like the previous version she had used, but it was far more effective when she was sure the enemy wouldn't be able to break out of the weaker barrier. "Bit of a rush job, but it'll do." Levy snapped her fingers. Solid script, shock cage. "Forget," Rufus muttered, right before the spell activated. Levy looked on in shock as the man walked out of the dissolving cage. "It's why I don't like solid script or other letter magic. I can't just learn it all so easily. However, once I know something, it's so easy to forget it. You've already shown me lightning and iron. I can forget both those words along with the others." Rufus took the pose he used for his magic, causing Levy to tense. "Memory make, colorful slashing attack flames." From the magic circle behind him burst out dense bright red flames. Black lightning within desperately tried to break free of its makeshift prison. Levy didn't waste time in waiting for the attack to hit, already beginning to move and to use her support words to their limit. "Forget." As she jumped, the words failed, breaking away. At the last second she swung her staff in front of her, creating a quick shield. Solid script, wall. The letter wall blocked the flames, but she knew it wouldn't again. Rufus had seen the word. It could only work once. Damn it, she'd been careless. His magic was more dangerous than she had first believed. If anything, it was actually worse than the magic Rusty Rose used, because at least she could freely do something about his. But this one? It was like he was draining her own power and using it to become stronger. "Are you hesitating? Very well, I shall take the lead then." Retaking his familiar pose, Rufus let the same magic circle appear behind him once more. "Memory make, Shrine of Turbulent Fang." With a wave of Rufus's hand, large whirlwinds generated all around them, their orientation putting them on a direct path towards Levy herself. Solid script, speed. She used the momentary boost she got from the word to break through the gaps between the whirlwinds, the word becoming useless a moment later as Rufus made himself forget it. She wasn't completely clear, however, and she wasn't fast enough to avoid the pull of the whirlwind as it dragged her back, sending her body flying across the battlefield. Recovering in the air, her staff being spun round so that the base faced the ground, she stabbed it downwards, used it to halt her momentum. Solid script combo, ice and velocity. "Forget!" screamed Rufus as ice projectiles burst towards him, the ice not vanishing but instead slowly to a speed he could just about avoid. Levy frowned. Why had he not just got rid of the whole spell? Why just slow it down? Velocity. He removed the word. She had felt it fade. But why not ice too? If he memorized it, he could forget it. Did that mean there was a limit to how fast he could memorize words? Had he only had time to memorize one word? Was that his reason for disliking letter magic? Well then, what if she was to take advantage of that? Oh, that was an idea. Twisting her staff around till it was horizontal to her, she pointed the point of the staff towards Rufus, gripping it with both hands for support. Rufus eyed her warily before acting himself. Solid script, blazing avalanche. Memory make, showering ancient wisdom. The longer name slowed Rufus down, but Levy had also been slowed by the word generation process. As an array of words for Earth shot forward from her staff, a massive burst of light shone down on her from above and forced her to crash against the ground. The impact knocked the staff's aim off Rufus and caused the massive burst of rock words to miss him, even as they burst into massive blasts of fire. "Memorized," Rufus muttered as the flames disappeared. Levi tried to get rid of the other words, but he still managed to memorize the rock word too. He was distracted, however, and she used that chance to try and escape her predicament. Tracing out letters on the ground, the word shadow appeared before her in the dirt. The shadows burst upwards before enveloping her body with them, the effect enough to help battle against the light for a few moments until they faded away from the light's intensity. In that time, however, she had managed to get out of that gravity pit and was in a safer area. This couldn't go on. If this kept up, she'd either run out of magic or run out of words. The more time that passed, the more of the base words that she used in combos that he would learn and memorize. No choice then. She'd have to use. She couldn't. Cacao was a phoenix. It was a bird of flames. Rufus had memorized the fire word and he'd be able to neutralize it in an instant. There was that, however. He was memorizing things, but there had to be a limit. He memorized spells, but there had to be a limit or a level of how far that went. Or maybe there was another thing that might work. Could he copy something that was more complex than a simple spell? It was a risk, but she had to believe that she was right if she wanted to win. "All right then," Levi whispered, stabbing her staff in front of her before she used all fingers to start generating the words. Once it was done, she could push them all through the staff, but for now this would be quicker, especially since she seemed to have made Rufus pause. "Is this it?" he asked, as if knowing what she was planning. "A last stand. I can sense the amount of magic you are pouring into this spell of yours. But tell me, have you got enough there that I can't memorize? Do you have enough words to fall back on that I haven't already seen?" Levi didn't listen to him, however, instead muttering a chant to herself. Despite speaking quietly to herself, it was still picked up by Rufus's keen ears. "Gather, O river of light that's guided by fairies. Shine, in order to perish the fangs of evil." Rufus froze. Those words. Know them, do you? Read about them and memorized them? Well, it won't be enough. Levi felt her guild mark tingling as a familiar sense of power flooded her veins. She knew it wouldn't last long. To use fairy glitter in the first place required a large chunk of her magic for one use, and Cacao did the same. Using them together, she had to sacrifice all of fairy glitter's ability as an offensive power. However, what was left was a single ability. One that would draw energy towards its core and shape it into the shape desired. That still required a start-up cost, but it was one she could deal with when it came down to it. Behind her, her spell began to form. Cacao started to rise slowly, a golden light covering the words and the phoenix's body as it formed, protecting it and helping to maintain the form of the bird itself. Levi grabbed the staff in front of her as the lacrima at the top of the staff burst to life, shining and pulsing a bright golden red as it supplied the last bit of her energy to the spell and added its own stored power that was kept in reserve. Solid fairy script, Cacao. Rufus looked at the spell in shock as he held his hands to his temple. Forget, 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 forget. It's not working, is it? Seems I was right. Levi pointed her staff forward and Cacao lunged. You can't memorize that which you can't obtain. And the spell that protects Cacao from you refuses to be learned by someone like you. This isn't over. Rufus refocus, calling on everything he had as well as Cacao flew at him. Memory make. Memory make. He couldn't think of anything. He had to calm down. He was panicking. They had to be something he had memorized strong enough to win. But what? What? It was too late. The phoenix reached him and its peak stopped right before it would have pierced his chest. He saw Levi walk towards him, her staff leaning against her shoulder. I can detonate Cacao anytime here or have my spell move closer than it already is. Yield. Rufus didn't want to admit defeat. He was a member of Sabretooth. He had to win. He couldn't surrender. He had to dash. And the match is over. Called out Chapati, snapping Rufus out of his fears. He looked up in shock to see Levi's spell fading away, the girl already walking away. Hold on. I didn't give up. I did it for you, said Renji, speaking from behind the man. Rufus looked at him in shock. When had he? It seems Sabretooth has decided to withdraw from this match, explained Chapati to the confused crowd. As such 10 points go to Fairy Tail B. Rufus dropped to his knees. I lost. Yes, Renji said. Come on now. You should be glad I came to snap you out in time. That girl really would hurt you with that spell of hers if she had detonated it at that range. You should count yourself lucky that this wasn't a real battle and just a match instead. Rufus followed, but he waited until they were out of sight before he finally spoke again. I've failed. Don't worry. I'll take the blame from the master if that's what you are worried about. Just be stronger next time. We're the strongest, right? So lose here and don't next time. That's all you have to do in my mind. Protector of the Fairies. Levy arrived back at the stands just as the second fight started to begin. She peered over the edge curiously as she tried to see who was fighting. Who's Gray against? Laxus looked towards her, the shock of his face evident from her sudden appearance. When did you get here? Just now. I missed the announcement in my rush. It's Raventail, Laxus muttered, trying and failing to hide the anger that laced his voice. My dad's guild, he chose to continue clarifying, the distaste at having to acknowledge the man as his father evident for all to hear. The mage meanwhile is that weird snake guy. Kurohibi, the copycat mage, according to the announcer at least. He'll be alright, won't he? I'm sure he'll be fine, added Miss Doggan. Congratulations by the way. For what? Levy quickly thought back to her match and the round before it. Oh that, thanks. It was nothing. That wasn't nothing, commented Ichigo, turning away from the fight towards her. We're at 16 points now. That's a good score for only the first day. So long as Gray doesn't lose here then we'll be in first place. He's got a point, Shinji added. Rufus was Sabretooth's mage and only he and Raventail got ahead of us in the first round. With your victory, they won't have as many points as they want to. Levy smiled. Thanks guys. She peered back over the edge to watch the fight, frowning as she saw Gray starting to get pressured by the other mage by a whole mix of magic. It seemed Kurohibi had also managed to copy Gray's ice make magic, though it looked far less effective than when Gray used it. She noticed a tap on her shoulder, turning her head towards the source to see Ichigo leaning down next to her. That was fairy glitter, wasn't it? He whispered. Levy nodded quickly, understanding why he was being quiet about it. Not many people would be able to link the use of the magic without the actually name, but a few clever ones might realize the true reason of why she added fairy into the name of her attack, and not just because she might want to pretend it was due to her being a fairy tale mage. I see. I thought so. It had the right feel to it. Almost the same feel as fairy sphere to be precise. I figured it would work, Levy whispered back. Rufus was eliminating word after word, and you know how a lot of my bigger spells work. I'm building on bases and he was taking them all away. Without fairy glitter, Kakao would have crumbled. Why did you think it would work though? It's his magic. He memorizes and uses everything he sees. I figured perhaps I might be able to use a spell to shield Kakao that he wouldn't be able to copy. He can see fairy glitter, but the reason I can even use it is because I have the mark. I'm allowed to. He can memorize it all he wants, but he's memorizing an empty shell. He lacks the knowledge of the key that opens it for use. It worked out at least, especially since it made him panic when he couldn't figure out what might be strong enough to stop Kakao. I doubt he had anything that could really. Not without developing a spell on that scale of his own. Well, it's our victory, replied Ichigo as he leaned back away from her. We'll all celebrate it tonight. Maybe the party will be even bigger if Fairy Tail A wins too. Yeah. Levy froze, twisting her head towards where the others were. She could see Natsu and Lucy watching, but Wendy and Urza were missing. Where's Urza? I forgot at the time, but I remembered in the city how she got wounded from that Garu Knight. Oh, she did, called out Shinji. That Garu Knight, as you put it, well, he basically started gunning for her. She couldn't last long before a scythe came flying out of nowhere. After a few hits she started to grow wiser to it. I think she worked out a trick to it or something, as it stopped happening once she switched armors and weapons. Problem is that cost her. She ended up almost last because she couldn't climb back up the rankings and protect herself. One isn't too bad, but doing both at the same time is trickier to do, especially if taking risks could end up failing if you even get scratched. It's like how your points stayed pretty much constant. Hers did as well. But she's alright, isn't she? I saw blood when he first got her. I think she's okay, Miss Ogden stated hesitantly. Wendy is treating her now with poor Lyusica. It will probably leave a scar, however. I don't think anyone expected Kama to be so ruthless. He wasn't careful with me either, Levy muttered. His first strike at me almost slit my throat. I would have died if I hadn't moved back in time. Why are they even in this? Asked Laxus, sighing in annoyance as he subtly glanced towards the enemy team in the distance. Like them, they were watching the match from their own booth, and he couldn't get a proper read on them from this distance to figure them out. There has to be a reason. They're executioners. They aren't people who can play nice with others and have fun battles. They seek to kill. So why are they in the games? Why did the king give them permission? Isn't it obvious? Shinji subtly gestured towards the king before back at the Garu Knights. Think about what the master said. He told us all what Natsu informed him off when we first got to Crocus. The king is up to something, and he certainly is no ally of ours, though being an enemy is also not confirmed either. We could be a threat, however, and so could Raventail if you let them be one. He's taking precautions. He's watching us. Levy gripped her staff tightly in anger. And I just showed him the strongest spell in my arsenal. I'm an idiot. It can't be helped, responded Ichigo. Either keep your techniques hidden or show them off because they are strong enough to gain respect or fear. Or both. There is nothing wrong with either of those two. I won't be holding back if I need to fight someone seriously. I'm the same, added Laxus. Let's face it, no one wants to hold back or admit defeat. We'll have to deal with him when or if it comes to it. Hopefully it never happens though. I hope so too. Levy frowned as she turned towards Lamia Scale. What happened with Uriah? I swear he should have gotten higher in the ranking. Miss Doggan shrugged. I'm not sure. He started slowly falling down really. I think it's because he drew too much attention. When his points dropped down nearer to the others, he became a target for those closer in points or lower than him. At the same time, the top knew he was a threat, especially Kaname. They made sure to limit his movements, sealing off what he could do at times, and it seemed as well that he was being careful. And rightly so too. I think everyone had to be cautious of what moves they made. Imagine how many points you would lose if you just tried and used some kind of large widespread techniques. They can still catch up, interrupted Shinji. Don't let your guard down. We know, we're not fools. Glancing back down towards Gray's fight, Miss Doggan let a frown appear on his face. Looks like Gray's having a bit of trouble. How much longer does he have? 25 minutes. I doubt it'll last that long. You think he'll lose? Oh no. I think he's going to win. Darted around the ice constructs Kurohibi launched at him one by one, Gray did his best to control his anger at the situation. He could swear that the other mage was mocking him. Why else would he continue to use his own magic against him, time after time? He darted up one of the ice constructs before leaping off, just in time to avoid the blast of sand that would have smashed into him if he had stayed where he had been. From what he remembered Max briefly showing them in the past, this magic was a lot like his. Either Kurohibi had encountered Max before or he had met a different user of the same type, or a similar type, of magic. He didn't have much time to rest and consider it, however, rolling out of the way quickly as a wave of fire threatened to incinerate him where he stood. At the very least he was getting a lot of confirmation that there was more types of magic that Kurohibi knew than what he had shown currently. The problem as well was that the man was fast. He had taken a few hits in close quarters, but they didn't have too much power behind them. It at least confirmed his suspicions that the man's true strength lay in the magic he copied. Hitting him became the problem since the man was like a snake, weaving and slipping through his grasp. He darted around the man, carefully observing every movement he saw the man made as he let loose an attack of his own. Ice make, lance. Kurohibi moved quickly, darting around each of the lances that flew towards. He smirked arrogantly before letting loose a burst of water from his hand, covering the ground all around Gray with water. Raising his other hand, Gray instantly worked out what Kurohibi was planning as lightning began to spark in it, rushing to form some kind of defense or barrier. Raising both hands, Gray slammed them down against the water at his feet, ice forming from his fingers. Ice make, floor. He barely made in time, the water freezing just as the lightning smashed into it. It seemed that had been what Kurohibi wanted, however, as the man shot towards him faster than he was ready for, sending a wave of sand towards him. Creating a shield to block the strike, Gray thought he was in the clear until the sand impacted against it and exploded all around the shield. Sand rebellion. Gray took a step back as the sand snapped out around his barrier, the tendrils formed trying to smash into previous position. The sand was relentless, however, the collision point where the sand collided acting as a source of more of the tendrils to lunge out from. He barely avoided it, quickly tracing his hand along the sand. As he did so, ice spread out from his pal, the sand freezing till he was surrounded by the frozen tendrils, some of them so close to skewing him that they were almost touching. That was enough. Enough running away. If this man wanted to fight him, he'd fight him. He'd goddamn kill him. His hands didn't bother going to his usual stance, instead taking the ice around him that he had created to use for his molding. He could tell Leon would be looking at him in shock for abandoning the stance, but he didn't care. Right now he didn't need something useless like that to slow him down. Forming a large broadsword of ice, about as tall as he was himself, he charged at Kurohibi recklessly, glad the man had gotten closer in his confidence. Ice make, cold Excalibur. With two fast slices at Kurohibi, Gray passed the mage, ice trailing in his wake. He turned round as the slashes of ice expanded, the Raventail mage quickly getting consumed Kurohibi inside a frozen prison. Is that it? Gray smirked arrogantly before he snapped his fingers, the ice shattering and freeing Kurohibi from his prison. Get up, he commanded as he walked towards the fallen mage. This can't be all you have. Gray paused as he was about to reach the mage, instead twisting the large sword his hand before he pulled it apart, the ice molding into two smaller blades. Ice make, ice bringer. Tossing one sword up, he watched it spin before he grabbed the hilt and threw it at the mage's body. The blade sliced into Kurohibi before the body started to break apart into tiny grains of sand. So you did use a clone. Gray glanced round, his eyes turning back towards the large area of sand from Kurohibi's last attack. The only time he had lost sight of him had been when he first created his shield. With that in mind, there was only one place where Kurohibi could be. Weighing the other blade carefully in his hand, Gray threw it forward, watching it slam into the sand and begin to freeze the ground around it. Kurohibi shot out quickly, unsettled but not willing to even consider backing down. His hands formed ice and molded it like Gray had before, creating a mirror image of the previous large broadsword. Ice make, cold Excalibur. Repeating what Gray did early, Kurohibi slashed at him and watched the ice trap Gray. That was until it all shattered, Gray giving him a condescending look as he flexed the arm he had used to take control of the other ice. You know you've gotten predictable, Gray stated, kicking at the ice at his feet in disgust. You copied my ice make magic. So why repeat using my own spells? They were constructed because they suited me. Are you me? No, you are not. You're a copycat, trying to imitate masters and always failing. Reaching for the ground, Gray picked up a small ice fragment before chucking it up and down in his hand. Each time it landed, the ice started to change, eventually coming to form a small elegant dagger by the time the fifth throw ended. If you're an amateur, you shouldn't try and abandon the stance used. Kurohibi hissed as flames flickered around his fists. Isn't that hypocritical of you to say that? You abandoned that stance after all. I'm not an amateur. Besides, working with ice is already second nature to me. I don't need to bother with such a weak form unless I need some ice to actually work with, and even then I'm getting rid of that weakness day after day. Gray didn't even consider who might be hearing his words as he spoke, forgetting all about Leon as his fellow disciple tightened his fist in an attempt to restrain his anger. All Gray's attention was on the prey before him. The one who had dared try and pretend to be his equal. Your skill is weak. Your constructs are brittle and flawed. You are flawed. Rushing forward, Gray dodged Kurohibi's attacks, using his anger against him. Oh, flames now. Well, they are decent enough, I supposed, but you copied them too. That's your magic. You copy everything and learn it all. But you're a jack of all trades and a master of none. Sneaking a kick in, Gray knocked Kurohibi back a few steps. Why don't I give you a treat, however? I'll show you how truly outclassed you are against me. Reaching up to the pendant around his neck, Gray gripped it tightly as green light flickered to life within his palm. He pulled down his hand from his neck slowly, the green energy following as it trailed in his hand's wake from within the clenched fist, and as it moved it revealed a single item missing from the chain. The pendant. Ice Blade of the Devil. The energy shot outwards from his palm, blinding Kurohibi for a brief moment as it struggled to take shape into anything. But with every passive moment, the energy came closer together, what had once been a mess of energy slowly forming a shape that became more and more recognizable as time passed. As the light finally ended, what greeted him in Gray's hand was a massive broadsword, the blade the same clear blue shade as the ice he formed normally. And yet at the same time, the blade seemed different from the similar styled version that he made from ice. The blade itself could have been said to have been almost see-through, reflections visible off the blade's ice-like surface. At the hilt, the original pendant could be seen, acting as a focus between the blade and the hilt. Extending downwards from it was a handle twice the necessary length that Gray needed for grabbing it, enough room present for him to grip it with both hands with ease and even then have a bit more room left. Kurohibi eyed the blade curiously, giving his own hands a flick before realizing the magic he was trying to copy wasn't taking shape. He had definitely gotten a hold of it, and yet he couldn't shape it. "You're missing something," said Gray arrogantly. "Someone like you can never use this. You copy so much from everyone else that it makes me wonder exactly how much of you is truly you. Do you have anything precious to you? Anything you value?" Gray smirked. "I can tell you don't. It means I see nothing wrong with getting rid of you." Green light flickering around his feet, Gray rushed forward quickly, unaware of the shocked expressions Gajeel and Panther Lily had on their faces as they watched from the audience. Kurohibi himself barely hid his surprise as Gray reached him so quickly, firing flames forward. A single swing of the sword had the flames frozen solid, shattering as Gray slammed into them, unconcerned about any injuries he might have taken in the process. The pommel of the sword continued round and slammed into Kurohibi's head, knocking him back far enough for Gray to spin round and slash the large sword along Kurohibi's chest, ice trailing in its wake as it left a large slash in the ground upwards at Kurohibi. The ice froze the wound, but it wasn't like when Gray froze his shut. This was intended to damage his enemy. The ice continued all the way up the slash, reaching part of Kurohibi's face and slicing across eye. Even with the ice covering it, Gray knew it was damaged because of his attack, and he found that he didn't care either. The Raventail mage struggled to stand from the wound, the ice sticking out of it not helping the matter, and it only took a single extra moment for him to fall to the ground. Gray took a step towards the fallen mage, standing over him as he raised the large broadsword upwards with one hand and prepared to swing. "Victory!" cried out Chapati, a trace of urgency in his voice as if fearing what Gray might do if he continued. "Victory goes to Fairy Tail, eh?" The voice was enough to snap Gray out of his trance, clenching one fist tightly as he released his grip on the large sword. It exploded into green energy, the pendant in the center of the blade hovering in the air momentarily as all of the energy poured back into it. Finally, when all the energy was almost gone, the cross flashed and shot downwards, reconnecting with the chain around Gray's neck and letting the last remnants of energy fade away. Gray took one last look at Kurohibi before rushing out of the arena, afraid that if he stayed any longer then he might actually continue trying to kill the man. Protector of the Fairies. Karen did her best to patiently wait for her opponent to climb down the stairs inside the stadium. She wasn't normally the most patient of people, and the situation right now didn't help the matter. She hadn't bothered taking the stairs herself when her name had been called, instead having thrown herself off the ledge and flown down so that she wouldn't have to wait any longer than necessary. She had too much anger building up inside her and she needed a punching bag to express it all out on. Ichigo Kurosaki. She needed to check with her dad to disprove him. He would know what her brother was called, and she'd call out this fake when she learned her brother's real first name. Still, a nagging thought in her mind betrayed her. Why had she never been told her brother's name? Was it because she would have worked it out straight away? Was it because it was obvious? And was it possible the reason her dad had always been so upset around the time of Fairy Tail's destruction at Tenro been because Ichigo was telling the truth? No, he had to be lying. If he really was her brother, then where had he been even before that? Those 7 years she could let go, but what about the 11 before that? And why even bother sending a present only once to give them hope? It was insulting. Perhaps he never even did so. Perhaps it had all been her dad's idea to try and cheer them up. Yeah, that had to be it. Why did she even keep such a stupid gift? She tried to reach up to it and throw it away, but she found herself not responding. What if she was wrong? What if it really was from her brother? That would make it the only gift he had ever given her, and part of hers didn't want to give it away. The relief from her thoughts luckily came when her opponent finally appeared. Juvia Vastia, a woman previously from the same guild as her so-called brother. That woman used a variation of water magic according to her teammates. Something simply called water. Fire vs water it seemed. She cracked her knuckles in anticipation. This should be a bit of fun at least. Indeed, said Juvia politely with a smile. Let's have a good fight. Thank God these two don't want to kill each other, muttered Chapati before realizing he could hear his voice through the speakers. Wait, is this still on? Ah, it is. Next fight, begin. Juvia wasted no time in acting, raising a hand and firing off a press-series jet of water at Karen. Swiftly dodging, Karen eyed the water as it ripped a hole in the wall not too far away behind where she had been. That blast was strong. Damn, and here she had been hoping for someone weaker so she could play around a bit more. Using Shunpo to zoom forward, she decided to end it in one hit. Aiming at the back of Juvia's neck, she swung with enough force that was sure to knock the girl out. That was her intention, however, until her hand passed right through Juvia's body, her continued swing pushing herself off balance, which Juvia quickly took advantage of. Bringing a hand back, Juvia slammed it at Karen's chest, sending her flying back as a mass of water burst from Juvia's hand. The water circled Karen even as she was sent flying, turning into a whirlpool that slowly started to encase her within itself. Juvia clenched a fist before the water snapped up around Karen, trapping her in a solid sphere of water. Water lock. Water was filling her lunges, and Karen couldn't help but clutch at her chest as she struggled for breath. She couldn't stay in here or else she'd drown. She wouldn't die, her opponent wasn't that sort of mage, but if she fell unconscious then she'd lose, and she refused to lose. She knew she could escape from this in two ways, but it was too soon to use one of her trump cards. She wanted to save it to surprise any future opponents. That left the one everyone knew about. And at least that would help with that steam she wanted to blow off. Struggling to get her hand down to her Zanpakuto, she noticed the water pressure increasing. It seemed Juvia had realized what she was up to and wanted to stop her. Well, too bad. Her Zanpakuto shifted without the need for her to call its name, becoming a mole once more. With the sudden change in size, her hand easily clenched around the hilt now before her. The prison holding her never stood a chance. The heat generated from releasing her Zanpakuto turned it all to steam before she darted out of it, using the steam as cover to start moving. Juvia backed away in time to avoid the slice of the blade, her water form allowing her to move more quickly than her body would allow her. She could feel the heat coming from that blade, however, and knew it would still hurt her in this form, despite the advantage she should have against such a blade. Holding her hands out in front of her, a large blast of water shot outwards from her palms. Water cyclone. The chains from Karen's gauntlets snapped out and wrapped around the vortex, flames being ignited along the chain and turning all the water trapped within to steam. Juvia wasn't fast enough this time as Karen burst through the steam, the mist too close for her to gain any warning. The point of the blade stopped right at her chest, Karen looking at her seriously as the two shared the same thought about the match's outcome. Juvia knew that, if this had been a matter of life and death, she wouldn't have managed to dodge that strike or move at all from this range before Karen got her. And that's match! Exclaimed Chapati, Karen letting her blade return to normal before returning it to its sheath. Karen Kurosaki wins. Mermaid Heel gains 10 points. Good match, Karen acknowledged as she passed Jovia. You're good. You too, replied Jovia. Seems I had a bit of bad luck today with you as my opponent. You're strong. I'm just perfectly suited to fight against you. Karen paused before holding out a hand, Jovia shaking it. It was fun. Same. Would you look at that? Such comradeship between mages. This is what we've been waiting for. Every single person watching Chapati could tell he was just happy to see a match that had ended naturally without fear for the other side. The audience couldn't help but cheer, leaving both mages with a smile on their faces as they left. As for Chapati, he could only hope the final match stayed like the third. Protector of the Fairies. Bacchus shakily stood his ground against his opponent, the gourd holding his alcohol long since emptied and discarded. The woman he was facing was more trouble than he liked to admit. He loved a good brawl, don't get him wrong. He loved charging in and exchanging blows against his enemy, feeling his hits connect and theirs doing the same in return. This woman however wouldn't give him that. He got hits on her but it wasn't enough. And to make matters worse, her plant magic was doing something to the air around him. He had been feeling drowsy ever since the match began and he didn't believe for 1 second that she was playing fair. He couldn't do anything about it though. There was no proof. The alcohol was all that kept him moving. It might have dulled his senses but at least he could stay awake. A large Venus flytrap tried to swallow him whole only for him to destroy it with a single hit, batting the rest that followed it away with a series of rapid palm strikes. Vines tried to grab him at all sides before he snapped out and grabbed them, pulling up the hidden plants from beneath the grounds and crushing them with additional strikes. He could see Cosmos glaring at him angrily before a large bell rang out, both pausing in their fight. Time! Shouted Chapati as the bell continued to ring. 30 minutes is up, and with that the fourth match comes to a close with a draw. Thank you all for your time today. Bacchus let out a sigh of relief as the last of the alcohol started to wear off. He immediately crashed to the ground, unable to move as his eyes began to grow heavy. Cosmos looked up towards the king before seeing him gesturing at Bacchus urgently, and only then did she sigh and approach the man, a flower raising up in front of him and spraying him with pollen. There's the antidote. Be happy His Highness is a kind individual. Bacchus didn't know what to say as he continued to lie there, a member of his guild quickly rushing down to help him out along with a few medics just in case. Chapati waiting until the field was clear before a large scoreboard appeared on all the lacrima screens. Now then, let's have a look at the scores. Here they are. First, Fairy Tale B, 16p. Second, Mermaid Heel, 12p. Third, Fairy Tale A, 11p. Fourth, Raven Tail, 10p. Fifth, Garu Knights, 8p. Fifth, Sabertooth, 8p. Seventh, Quattro Cerberus, 5p. Eighth, Lamia Scale, 4p. Would you look at that scores? Surprisingly it seems like Fairy Tale taking the lead right now, leading with 16 points after their good performance in Hidden and their win against Sabertooth. Our former champions seem to be sharing fifth right now with the Garu Knights. Will they have a turnaround? And what about Lamia Scale and Quattro Cerberus? Both are hanging at the bottom currently, but will they surprise us tomorrow? We'll have to see. Thank you all for joining us today. Lahar, Jenny, thank you for joining us as well. It was my pleasure, said Lahar, looking at the scores. It's worth it all to see such interesting sights. I just wish Blue Pegasus had made it through, added Jenny, but what can you do? Maybe next year. Well said Jenny. Thank you all, we'll see you tomorrow. Protector of the Fairies. Ah! Exclaimed Ichigo as he let himself fall onto his bed. Finally an end to the day. I don't see why you are complaining, said Levi, crossing her arms. I did all the work today. And you did it brilliantly, Levi, Ichigo muttered, his voice muffled by the pillow. You heard what the master said? We have the lead now. Levi nodded, remembering the master's words. He'd been overjoyed that they had taken such an early lead, especially that she had been the one to do it all single-handedly. Urza got a similar treatment for ensuring they were in third place. She had gone to see Urza after the day had ended and the woman had been perfectly fine after a session with Wendy and poor Lyusica, the only injuries being a bit of awkwardness when she moved too quickly, and even that was said to be fading. It would probably even be gone after a good night's sleep. "We still have tomorrow to go," said Laxus. "And all the other days. It's still worth celebrating," argued Miss Doggan. "I mean we have to take any victory we can get here. That actually is good timing." Ichigo raised his head from the pillar as Levi interrupted the others. "I don't think I should participate in any further games." "What?" Laxus shook his head. "That's ridiculous. Did you not see what you did today?" "Let's hear her out," called out Shinji, crossing his arms with interest. "I think I know what this is about." Levi leaned back against the wall. "Think about it. I've fought twice today. I snatched victory for us, but I've not only started to show my strength but I've used my trump card too. It's not a good idea for me to fight anymore with everyone aware of Kakawa. You think I'll get the chance to pull it out again if someone was to fight me? You've thought this through a lot, haven't you?" asked Ichigo, Levi giving him a nod in response. He could already see that there would be no point trying to argue with her right now. "All right, go ahead. But who do you recommend to replace you?" "Ah, I already have someone." She quickly rushed to the door when she heard it knock, letting Taoshiro in. "Ah, perfect timing." "Taoshiro." Ichigo stared at Taoshiro before the man turned away, his face filled with a mix of awkwardness and slight anger, the latter looking almost confused too, as if he was struggling to direct it properly. "You'll still upset." "I'll do it," said Taoshiro, facing Shinji. "I'm more than capable of fighting. He's good, I can vouch for that." Shinji looked at Ichigo. "Why didn't you use him from the start?" "Because he's in no condition to fight." Taoshiro's head snapped round to face him. "I can fight perfectly fine." "Can you?" "At full strength." Taoshiro didn't turn away, but his eyes did glance to the side. "I've learned to manage." After careful deliberation, Ichigo finally nodded at Taoshiro. He wasn't sure why the guy was angry at him, it had to be him since he was fine with Shinji, but this might at least be a good way to find out. And even without Bankai, Taoshiro would still be a strong enemy for someone to face. "Fine then, you can compete. Just be careful, will you? I don't want to hear that from someone who doesn't even listen to his own advice." Taoshiro turned on his heel and marched out of the room. "I'll see you all in the morning. I want to get some sleep before the early start tomorrow." "I might as well do the same," said Laxus as he made to leave. "I'll see you all tomorrow." "See ya," muttered Ichigo, collapsing back down onto his bed. Shinji chuckled as he left as well, getting up from Mistogan's bed while the man began taking the top coat of his suit off to hang up for the morning. He was just hanging it up when he felt a pull on his sleeve as Levi passed him. He glanced at the girl curiously before excusing himself from the others, heading outside of the room and closing the door. Levi waited for him round the corner, her arms crossed as she glanced behind him in case he was followed. "I need you to do me a favor," Levi muttered quietly. "Can you keep an eye on Ichigo?" "Why?" Levi glanced round the corner again to make sure they were safe. "Look, he's being suspicious again. I shouldn't be feeling this way, but I just want to be sure. He's hiding something and he doesn't want us to interfere. I'd say he doesn't trust us, but the reality is that he probably doesn't want to get us involved. Can you keep an eye on him? Just to make sure he doesn't sneak out, or to let me know if he does." Miss Doggan frowned before nodding slightly. "I can tell you a bit, but I won't betray any trust that he may give me. I will only inform you if he decides to leave, and I do not know why myself." "That's better than nothing, I suppose." "Thanks, Miss Doggan. Just keep an eye on him, remember. I'm worried for what he might be planning. I don't want him to get hurt for our sakes like he always does." Protector of the Fairies. The first night. Shunsui broke off with Shunpo as he approached the ruins of his old friend's house, his feet coming to rest on the gently rusting strands of grass that spread out from its entrance. Pausing to take in the scenery once more, he wasn't sure exactly what he expected. It was always the same, and yet he always hoped a new clue would appear if he looked at it again. Perhaps something would finally become clear after 7 years of missing something, but it was unlikely. He had searched this place from top to bottom so many times that he had lost count. Letting loose another sigh, he began to walk the final short distance between the small stone path and the house's main entrance. He was here for a purpose after all, and that purpose was because someone had triggered the wards. Someone was here. It was always such a shame to see the place in such a state. As he made his way underneath the overgrown hedge arch, having to bend down slightly to avoid the overhanging shrubbery, he wondered perhaps if it would be worth fixing the place at some point once he finally solved the mystery around Juoshiro's death. It would at least make it more pleasant to look at, but he knew there was no way he could do anything about it yet. It served an important purpose after all. A reminder, to keep moving forward, constantly searching for the answers he sought, and to not forget the goal he desired. Entering the house, he pushed up one of the beams that had fallen by the doorway, squeezing through the small gap as quickly as he could. The path he took led him to the living room, the same room that he knew would be covered in dried red blood. I wondered who was here, Shunsui said as he entered the room, glancing at the figure hunched over by the blood. I thought to myself, who might know where Juoshiro lived, and that list is a very short one. Most of those people however were near me at the time and aren't fast enough to try and trick me like that at such a long distance. And few of those people have the mindset to use teleporting types of magic at this range too. Shunsui crossed his arms, waiting for the man in front of him to turn around. You were about third on the list, Ichigo, and only because I'm not even sure how you got here so quickly. You always were a perceptive one, Shunsui, said Ichigo as he turned away from the dried blood, a small blade being revealed for a second before the cloak hid it away, a faint trail of energy that came from the blade vanishing and leaving no trace. Ichigo clenched a fist angrily before he took a calming breath, slowly unclenching the fists after counting to 5 in his head. What happened here, Shunsui? What happened to Juoshiro? You came here without knowing that. Byakuya told me roughly what he knew. Juoshiro died. I knew that, I accepted that, but even so, I wanted to know what happened. I wanted to know how he died and when, so I decided to make a stop and come look for him here. Now he could have moved, but I think we both knew what kind of man Juoshiro was. In the past, I remembered that we'd chat sometimes, and he'd spend half of the time lecturing me on some interesting bit of kidyu he thought I might want to learn while tending to the hundreds of flowers that he had planted and cared for in this garden. He wouldn't have left this place. It was his haven. His peaceful piece of land in a world where everything had to be treated with a careful hand and a watchful eye. Swinging an arm out, anger in his eyes, Ichigo gestured behind him at the state of the house. So then why is everything destroyed? What happened to Juoshiro? Shunsui sighed, leaning against the half of the wall that hadn't collapsed. He's dead, Ichigo. What other answer do you need? Dead? I know that. Of course I know that. But he didn't just die because of old age. He didn't die because of his illness. Ichigo's hand dropped down to his side, his gaze falling on the dried blood again. How long ago was he murdered? Murdered, you say? Don't jest with me, Shunsui. Look at this place. An illness doesn't do this. His illness doesn't make him chuck up this much blood all at once. There was a fight here, a big one, and I doubt he went down easily looking at the state of this place. Am I wrong? Shunsui shook his head. No, I don't think you are. I don't know much of what happened here myself, I was far too late, but the blood was already dry when I got here. The garden had already started to get out of control too, which is a testament to how covered up this all was and how much time had passed. Juoshiro had plenty of rare plants and they needed constant attention. Leave them for a week or less sometimes and they'd die. Some could last longer but they still needed tending to. It was his way to pass the time without pushing his body too far, and all those plants were dead when I got here. The magic residue of the attacks was gone, along with Juoshiro, and I haven't felt my old friend in over 7 years since that day. In my opinion, I think they may have taken him and killed him. And who might they be? Who killed him? I don't know. But you have ideas, right? You have suspicions. And what will you do if I tell you this? Asked Shunsui, his eyes unnaturally cold as he stared into Ichigo's own. Will you hunt them down, no matter who they might be, and kill them? Will you try and get the vengeance you believe Juoshiro deserves? No matter the cost. Why don't you ask yourself what you are doing before you talk to me about that? We both want the same thing. Vengeance for his death and answers for why. Because I see no reason to kill a retired man who had decided to stay isolated from the rest of the affairs of the Magic Council for the rest of his life. Now you see the issue of his death. Random coincidence, purposeful elimination, I always have believed it to be the latter, but, if it is, there are even fewer people in the world capable of finding him. Tell me, do you know where any other member of the Magic Council lives when they retire? Where any old chairmen live? Only Juoshiro. Ichigo glanced around the house fondly. I remember him showing this place to me for the first time. He was teaching me a particularly tricky bit of kata that I was having trouble mastering myself, and he admitted it was better for fewer to know of my potential back then. We just used the area nearby to train and then came back here to rest in between. Said he didn't want all my failures to blow up all his hard work. Then you see the issue. You are unusual in all the people on the list who knew where he lived, because normally someone like you wouldn't ever be close to the chairman. You were kind of like a contract he might use, and yet he became something of a friend and mentor to you. That's unusual, which means anyone else who knew where he lived knew so through one of two sources. I assume one was being told. Indeed. I knew where he lived because he showed me, just as he did you. Shunsui pointed at Ichigo. You were the same, just as you said. So what about the other option? Ichigo shrugged. I don't know. Records maybe. Exactly. But those should have been sealed, hidden away from the public eye when he was the chairman and kept hidden when he retired. They are the only other place where his address would be noted down on, and yet someone still found this place. That can only mean one thing. That they had the ability to see those records firsthand. Either they had clearance, and that applies a security rating as high as his own, or they are strong enough to sneak through the defenses or break through them to find that document, and to also not get caught in the process. Ichigo frowned as he considered what he said. You consider the chairman a suspect. You don't. I do. He's a very suspicious person. He fits the evidence, though his motive escapes me. And it must do you as well if you have yet to act myself. Well, it's not as easy for an old man like me to act. I'm sure you know some of the panic Byakuya caused if you kept up with the situation around Fiori. People were asking a lot of questions, wondering why he could have betrayed the Magic Council and what it meant. Now ask yourself, what would my betrayal cause? Chaos, Ichigo answered, the words snapping out before Shunsui had time to breathe. Combine that with the reveal of Juoshiro's death, because I should have seen at least something about it if he had died officially, so it could only have been hidden from the public, would cause chaos to spread through all of Fiori. Nowhere would be safe, and we both know plenty of dark guilds would try and take advantage of that chaos. Not just dark guilds, corrected Shunsui. There are many organizations that would love to use that chaos for their own ends. The Zentopia Church would try and gain more influence, the king might try and regain control of magical matters in Fiori for himself, and they are just the organizations people respect. You need to also consider the more illegal ones. The cults of Zeref are still at large, even in this day and age, and they would love to try and plunge the world back into darkness for their god. And then there's them. The ones just waiting for a sign of weakness to try and invade Ishgar once again. Again? Just when was Ishgar first invaded? Who are you talking about? Juoshiro never told you? That's surprising. I thought he would have informed you when you became a wizard saint, so you could at least act on anything if it happened. Don't worry about it much right now. It's not something you need to concern yourself about. Shrugging, Ichigo returned to the matter at hand. So what if I was to act Shunsui instead of you? Would the same happen? You'd drag Fairy Tail with you. Everyone knows you. Take away guild arts and you'd probably be Fairy Tail's ace mage. You were the Shinigami that really kicked off the power race 7 years ago, because it certainly didn't happen because of old men like me or your father. Shunsui sighed, bringing a hand to his head in frustration. I won't deny that I hate the situation we are both in, but we have to deal with the cards we have been dealt. I just wish Juoshiro had left some clue to help. A clue? Ichigo frowned. Hey, you ever heard of the word kami cake? Shunsui froze. Kami cake? You are saying that right, aren't you? Yeah. And where did you hear such a word? Is it important? Maybe, yes. Ichigo frowned again but answered anyway. I broke into the library at the Magic Council. Hey, don't look at me like that, it was necessary. Anyway, I was able to access a shut-off area because my magic signature had been used as the record for Juoshiro's own. In there I found a letter, and he mentioned how the kami cake was in the way to being successful. I tried looking it up recently but no luck. I couldn't find even a single mention about it in the place I've been hanging out in. Shunsui frowned himself as he considered what he had just heard. The kami cake, huh? It's been a long time since I heard that word. So long in fact. It's a technique if you must know. One I'm not comfortable into going into details about. He confided in me about what it does, and I'm not willing to break that trust. I'm unaware of what Juoshiro was doing with it however, and that bothers me because I should. You think he kept it a secret from even you then? He wouldn't have, muttered Shunsui. Not if there was a matter as serious as needing the kami cake. What the hell was he planning? Why don't I know it too? Well, if you can't tell me what it does, I'll leave it to you to try and work out what he was planning for the both of us for now, said Ichigo before he jumped upwards, escaping out of one of the holes in the half of the roof that wasn't broken. Shunsui, seeing him leaving, quickly went after him, cutting him off before he could get away from the roof. He wasn't done with him yet. Hold on. Ichigo froze as Shunsui's call, pausing in the air and allowing Shunsui to take up a position in front of him once again. How did you get here? What are you talking about, Shunsui? We are far too far from Crocus right now for you to make it here at this time. Not even your Yuaki could manage the trip between the two this quickly. Either you're faster than she is or what? I don't know, Shunsui said finally. Teleportation? If I remember correctly, there was one or two people capable of that magic that you know. Certain mages who liked to cause trouble over the years. You're one smart individual, Shunsui. Which is why I can't really afford to spend too much time with you right now. Not yet at least. You. What are you planning? Ichigo smiled sadly. Don't worry, I'm sure you'll see it soon enough. But I suppose I should share something with you before I leave. A glint of metal shone as a small blade escaped from Ichigo's cloak, Ichigo holding it loosely with his left hand. Shunsui took one look at before realizing what was off about it. Or rather, the energy around it. I can barely sense it, Ichigo muttered, raising the blade to eye level as he glared into the metal. Can you sense it? You should just be able to. I can, muttered Shunsui in shock. Just what is that? Oh? You can sense how foul it is too, I see. His eyes showing nothing but disgust, Ichigo tore his eyes away from the blade, trying to ignore the slight chip on what should be a perfectly crafted blade. It's been so long that I'm not surprised you never noticed this. I'm only able to help you see what you missed because I'm getting some help from the traces left behind from 7 years ago. There was nothing left, Ichigo. What makes you so sure that the energy you're helping me sense is even from back then? It could just be from nearby for all we know. Ichigo scowled. I'm not wrong. To be honest, there should be nothing left. And yet there's this foul stench about this place that wasn't here 7 years ago. It's not even detectable most of the time, but it's there in the background. To be honest, I'm not sure how long it's been here. Maybe it was just background energy that Juoshiro was unfortunate enough to have running through his house, or maybe it is from 7 years ago since it was clinging quite heavily to the blood on the floor. Shaking his head, Ichigo let his scowl drop as he shrugged. I don't know if it's much, but it's something. At least if you know what this energy feels like, it'll help if you sense anything similar to it. Not that I ever want to sense this stuff again. You know how much effort it was to get a tiny grasp on it? Hard. I feel like I need a bath just from maneuvering it into our senses. But anyway, do with this info what you want. I'm done here for now. Ichigo dash. See ya. Shunsui lunged for Ichigo even as he spoke, only to find that Ichigo vanished right before his eyes, a foot slamming against his shoulder and using him as a springboard. He was already turning the moment the weight vanished, but by then it was too late. Ichigo already out of sight. There was only one person he knew who could accelerate that quickly from zero, and that was Yoryuki. And from what he remembered, Ichigo wasn't that fast years ago. What the hell did you do in 3 months? He found himself asking, even though Ichigo was long gone. I don't care how fast Juoshiro said your strength can grow, this is far beyond even that. What the hell are you planning, Ichigo? What the hell is Juoshiro planning? And how much do your two plans intersect with one another? Protector of the Fairies. I am displeased, Arcadios. Your Highness. Toma stared down at the kneeling knight from his throne, an angry snarl on his face. Have you wondered why I've summoned you? I am unsure of what you might be referring to. I see then. Perhaps I shall fill you in. What task did I assign you only last week? To create a perimeter around the city and to monitor all those entering and to report on any leaving. I see. Good, you at least know what you failed at. Failed. The knight raised his head, meeting Toma's eyes. The knight was seen as impressive to most, always clad in some of the finest armor the kingdom had to offer with a cape down his back. He never bothered with a helmet outside of emergencies, meaning his black wavy hair was sticking up around his head. Sideburns trailed back down before finally connecting into a curved and pointed beard, something that sometimes made him look far more serious than he sometimes wanted to appear. Arcadios opened his mouth a few times, struggling to think of how to phrase his question. My king, may I ask what I failed at? I have followed my orders to the letter dash. And yet Ichigo Kurosaki managed to not only escape your blockade but also make it unseen all the way to the Archbishop of Zentopia. Arcadios opened his mouth again, but this time it was due to shock only. Impossible. Is it? The timing seems impossible unless he has obtained a level of speed beyond anything anyone else can keep up with, but there is another possibility. One time where he could have made a swap. Arcadios frowned before his mind came to the answer he was looking for. The battle round. He did it then. There could be no other time where he could make it in time, and even then this is pushing it, but he could still possibly do it. Any other time, the Garu Knights would have at least spotted something out of the ordinary as he tried to leave. You are familiar with what Jalal Fernandez did, if I am correct. Thought projections can fool people, and he would only need to master it enough to ensure it could fool us. Once he knew he wasn't fighting, he didn't have to stick around. That's impossible, Arcadios cut in, criticizing the king's deduction before he could stop himself. We would have known. Come again, Arcadios? What was that? I mean, it's impossible, sir. You have to understand, we had sensors scanning the area and we should have sensed him still if he left. Someone with that much magical power can't disappear without anyone noticing. Tell me, do you know the real name of this Mistogan in the tournament? Arcadios nodded. There is the answer. That man only had to teach Ichigo Kurosaki this technique and how to do it, and then he would be able to pretend he was still here. I'm sure he would be able to spar enough magical power to fill a suitably skilled clone. So long as he never fought, no one would realize he lacked his max power. But your highness, there weren't any fluctuations at all. Toma paused in his explanations, looking at Arcadios in confusion. To make a thought projection and to then fill it with magic, there would be been a spike and then a drop in his own originally. If there had been, then we could assume he did make a switch, but even that should have been noticed. There is no way he could have done such an act without our knowledge. Are you sure, Arcadios? Arcadios paused before nodding. I'm not 100% sure, but there is too much evidence against such an idea. I see. Toma fell into a slump against the back of his throne. I'm sorry for doubting you, Arcadios. It's the stress. This is the last chance we have right now, and to hear from the Archbishop that he had been visited by Ichigo Kurosaki. Why him? Why are so worried about what he may do? Are you aware of how I obtained the Garu Knights? 10 years ago I sent out a request to mages. A request that many signed up for and many backed out of. Most of them that backed out were either weak or were strong back then but aren't now. Ichigo Kurosaki is different. He is the only one from back then who was going to join, but backed out, who is still a possible threat. So the people you sent to get the pieces necessary for the project. The 5 that became the Garu Knights. If I had managed to obtain this Shinigami, then they would be even stronger. You saw what he did to the maze that was developed. He sliced through it like butter and did that with one blade. He has 2 blades. Imagine what would have been possible if he had been on our side. The Garu Knights could have evolved further into a deadly force of both assassination and raw power with him at helm. If only. Did he learn of the Eclipse project? Toma was silent for a moment before he finally whispered an answer, Arcadios hearing it in the deadly silent room. I'm not certain. But he knew about the infinity clock. And he knew about the possibility of it being combined with another artifact. I think there is a good possibility that he does. Then what do we do? You are the king. You cannot fear such a man. I know that, replied Toma instantly, doing his best to stay calm. We have to press on regardless of his actions. How is the barrier preparation coming for the coming matches? I fear we may need it to confirm the safety of the audience safe. It's going as expected. Their strength will be at the peak on the final day, with reserve systems already being prepared for any losses on the days beforehand. At the very least, we are getting more energy than we originally anticipated from the mages this year if the first day was anything to go by. That spell that girl from Fairy Tale used had a lot of excess energy that we managed to siphon off when it finally ended. Things are going according to schedule roughly. They better be. With all these mages in such a small area, each with their own unique brand of powers and all strong, it's a recipe for disaster. These grand magic games are dangerous, but there is no choice. We move forward, for the sake of the future we will create. Protector of the Fairies. Rufus nervously kneeled at his guild master's feet, his head bowed deeply in apology. His eyes glanced upwards just enough to be able to see the bored expression on the master's face, the large man leaning slightly out of his chair. The master was an old man, and yet his body was kept in the peak physical condition that he was capable of. It was all to do with his dedication to prove that everyone had to be the best in his guild. He didn't even let himself off from them. A necklace of red orbs circled the master's neck while a crown-like hat rested on his head, the mark of saber-tooth just below it on the master's forehead. So then, the master finally spoke. What do you have to say for yourself, Rufus? Rufus bowed his head lower, not wanting to be caught being disrespectful to this man. I failed, Master Ja'ama. I have no excuses for my actions. The crowd behind him all grew restless. He knew why. If there was anything the master hated more than failure, it was failure without cause or mistake. It was when you failed because the other side was stronger. Hold on, protested Renji, stepping forward. Master, I am the one who pulled him out. Blame me for his loss. Should I really, Renji? Asked Ja'ama. Are you telling me what to do? Of course not, Master. Merely consider myself as part of his defeat as well. Ja'ama considered this for a moment before shaking his head. No, I don't think I shall. Your actions were to avoid causing Sabretooth any further shame. You acted to make the most of bad situation. Rufus, however, was the one who lost, and he must suffer the consequences of such an action. Please, Master, protested Rufus. I can beat her next time. I did so in the first round. I'll find a chance to do so again in a match. It's already too late. You've lost your chance, and you won't get another. Rufus looked up a bit as the tone in the master's voice. The master sounded annoyed. More so than normal. You think they will continue to let her fight? She's used her trump card already. If she fights again, there is no guarantee she can win. So she'll be pulled out to keep up that image of her invincibility from the battle. Rufus bowed his head back down as he saw the master start to push himself out of his chair, hearing large footsteps approaching him. He could see the large shadow being cast over him as Ja'ama stopped before him, a fist clenched. Are you willing to make up for the disgrace you caused? Rufus hesitantly nodded. I am. Good. Ja'ama raised one large fist before swinging it round, getting it underneath Rufus's bowing body, slamming it against Rufus's chest and knocking the wind out of him as he was sent flying back. Sting and Rogue barely managed to catch him as the mage was sent into the crowds, hesitantly holding one arm each from the man. They looked at Rufus uncertainly before looking back towards the master, only to find Ja'ama was already retreating back to his seat. Rufus looked up in shock, realizing nothing else was coming. Master! You have made amends. That hit is the equivalent of the impact our reputation has taken. The moment she pulled out that spell, I knew you were incapable of winning from that point onwards. It stopped being a matter of you being a member of the strongest guild and rather a situation where you were faced off against an unstoppable spell. I can find a way to stop it, argued Rufus, not willing to allow the hit his pride would take at recognizing the spell as unstoppable. I'll figure out its components and then dash. You'll still fail. Ja'ama didn't sound angry any longer, instead seeming more accepting of the situation. I saw that spell myself from the stands. I felt the power it radiated by just existing. What you were up against ranks on a similar level of Juraniki's as Tenkin's spell. Rufus could hear the uneasiness of everyone behind him. Everyone knew of Jura's strength. He was ranked number 5 out of all the wizard saints, only being surpassed by the 4 gods of Ishgar, and those 4 were people most didn't even classify as human sometimes. The Tenkin spell was well known to all as well, being the man's finishing move on strong opponents. But Tenkin's power doesn't compare to Kakao Master. I've seen the spell once through a lacrima. Condensed power is what it is. And it barely takes up any of Jura's own strength nowadays. But, more importantly, it is the stepping stone for what could be to come. Ja'ama shook his head at the very thought of it all. Our reputation will only become stronger in some ways because the enemy had to break out such a powerful spell to bring you down. And unless you have a legendary spell of your own or an overwhelming amount of magical power to combat the attack with, your victory is almost guaranteed to be gone. It is not a spell that can be fought by normal rules since it has thrown away the rules most techniques follow in the first place. A legendary spell. Rufus knew what Ja'ama was implying. In magic there was always 3 levels. The standard level, the forbidden level, and finally the legendary level. The problem with the last level however was that very few mages had ever reached such heights. None ever tried because they didn't even realize that such a level existed. Many hadn't until it had been revealed by Jura. The spells were different from ones like the fairy law spell that the guild master of Fairy Tail was known to be able to use because they were always linked to the user's own magic and normally were unable to be copied due to their complexity. It was said that Jura understood his completely and yet was unable to explain even a single bit of how it all worked to others since some of the knowledge he had of the spell was so innate to him that it couldn't be put into words. Everyone had the potential. They just had to learn themselves. It couldn't be taught, it couldn't be read about, but something still bothered him. How had Levy McGarden, a girl who had been gone for 7 years, managed to catch up to them all by creating such a technique in time? Or did the master really mean to imply that hers truly was one of these techniques, because that could only mean one thing? That she had the technique before the Tenro Island incident even happened. That she had it before even Jura's Tenkin was announced about 6 years ago. I see, said Rufus finally. My loss was predetermined then. No wonder they don't want to have her fight any longer. No one would risk letting her cast that spell again. Now you see. And that will become a double-edged sword for Fairy Tail. Others will pick up on it and, while she will remain undefeated, mages will also realize she was pulled out because they knew we would all realize to not let her use that spell. We will allow Fairy Tail this brief lead. It will not last. Then, and only then, shall we show everyone why not even Fairy Tail can win against Sabretooth. We will not yield. Let them act like they are on top. We'll sharpen our fangs and wait for the opening that will inevitably follow. After all, standing at the top also means having to watch out for all the ones below trying to snatch that throne for themselves. Ja'ama's head shot towards Renji, no longer interested in Rufus. You're entering the task tomorrow, Renji. I expect nothing less than victory from you. I won't let you down, Master, said Renji respectfully. Should we take countermeasures against the other members of Fairy Tail? More of them might have such a spell or something of similar strength. Oh, they certainly do. 2 of them right now are Shinigami and they will have their own Bankai to combat your own. Be wary of Mistogan as well. He has aged, which means he is not the same as the images you can see of him 7 years ago. He may have pushed himself to a similar height of the girl and Jura. As for the Dragon Slayer, it needs not be said to be wary of him if he is also in a team of such monsters. Looking around, Ja'ama slammed a fist down on the armrest of his chair. If you can't win naturally, grab victory with everything you have. Use every dirty trick you have in your arsenal and do not accept defeat until you can no longer move. We are the strongest. We are the ones who will win. We are Sabretooth, protector of the fairies. Carla woke up in the middle of the night screaming, instantly trying to stifle her cries before Wendy could hear them. It didn't work, however, as the young girl was already having her eyes flickering open as she let out a large yawn, her arms stretching above her head. Carla. Carla quickly tried to keep still, but it didn't work, Wendy sensing the unease in her, or maybe it was her getting a feeling from all the magic around her of the situation. She never got how Wendy's gift worked exactly, even after being by her side for years. It's all right, Wendy. Go back to sleep. Wendy glanced at the time before letting out another yawn. It's 1 in the morning. Are you okay, Carla? I'm fine, Carla snapped out, instantly regretting it when she saw the hurt that appeared on Wendy's face. I mean dash. It's okay, Carla. You don't have to tell me. It's just a nightmare, Carla muttered. It's not real. Wendy thought back to her time at Kate's shelter, remembering similar times where Carla had woken up like this. For once, she wondered if it was Carla's power of precognition subconsciously at work while she dreamed. Did you see something? Carla flinched. It's just a dream, Wendy. But you've had this before, Carla. You once even described one of your dreams when I was younger to me, and now I think about it, there were some of the events that you described happening from time to time. Carla hesitated for a moment, looking towards Levy in the other bed and sighed when she saw the other girl was still fast asleep. It was fragments. I didn't see much. But you did see something. Carla nodded. Where to start? There was a white knight, wielding a long but thin blade as he cut down an endless swarm of these strange creatures. There was something else as well in a different part. Some form of magical array. An enormous one. Really? A slight twinkle appeared in Wendy's eyes as she tried to imagine such a thing. I wonder how it would look. I bet it would be amazing. Please focus, Wendy, Carla said as she snapped the girl out of it. I saw other things. Mercurius, it was in ruins. That was clear enough. In ruins. Wendy frowned as she looked towards the window at the castle in the distance, a worried look in her eyes. That's horrible. What about everyone inside? I don't know, admitted Carla. I saw strange creatures as well. They were too blurred to make out, and yet I saw fights breaking out in the skies. It was like the dark sky was suddenly lit up by something, and I couldn't even stars on the moon up in there through the cloak of darkness of that night. But that wasn't the worst part, Wendy. Carla gripped the bedsheet tightly, as if afraid to even say the words she needed to say. I saw Lucy. Lucy? Was she okay? She. Carla refused to look at Wendy as she muttered the words that she knew would upset the young girl immensely. She and what looked like Yukino Aguirre from Mermaid Heel were both there, lying on the ground unmoving. There were others nearby too, but I could only recognize one of them. But the two girls. They weren't moving. I think they were dead. Protector of the fairies. Oh, for God's sake, get up already! Screamed Levy, slamming her fists against the door of Ichigo's room. She wasn't bothering to hide her irritation, and the other mages who had gotten up late hurried past her to not get dragged into it as well. Levy paid them no mind. They weren't part of the team, merely the audience watching. Ichigo, however, was, and he was also late, just like yesterday. It didn't matter how fast he could move, he should have at least tried to get up early with the rest of them. She knew he was in there at least. Shinji had mentioned it as he was leaving, having sensed no movement in Ichigo from upstairs, which now had her almost ready to break down the door. How the hell had Miss Doggan not bothered to mention this to anyone anyway? He had already left and yet couldn't be bothered to wake Ichigo up. To be honest, his attitude around Ichigo at the moment was a bit surprising. He was a bit colder, not at all like what it had been at Tenro Island. The door finally opened, but it wasn't Ichigo that she saw, instead Nozomi yawning loudly as she rubbed her eyes. She saw Levy's shocked and furious expression before tilting her head. Can I help you? What the hell are you doing in there? She crossed her arms, trying to lean around the girl instead. Never mind that, where is Ichigo? I believe he is just getting up, Nozomi admitted. Ah, there was the tournament again today. And what are you doing in here? I got lost. Levi sighed in frustration. Your room is only a few doors down. I lost my key. You have the ability to open portals and basically teleport. I decided to sleep here. Well, at least that's the most honest thing you've said out of them all. Wait, why the hell did Ichigo even let you sleep in here? And where the hell did you sleep? I lent her my bed, answered Ichigo as he appeared in the doorway. Well, I say lent, it was more she had already stolen it from me when I got in. Got in? Levi frowned. But you were lying on it when we left you originally last night. Did you go out or something? Ichigo smirked, patting her on the head. Nothing to worry about, Levi, I just needed some fresh air. Don't worry, I didn't run away or anything. Well, just hurry up. Everyone else is going to be waiting for you. Levi quickly turned on her heel before she started rushing towards the stairs. I need to get there myself anyway. Good luck. Ichigo gave her a wave before closing the door, Nozomi staring at him with crossed arms. He simply gave her a nod of thanks as he passed, grabbing the two blades lying by the bed. Thanks for the help, Nozomi. You know my appearance won't distract her next time. I can only cause so many misunderstandings until people start to look for the less obvious answer. We just need a bit more time, Nozomi, said Ichigo, pulling up the sleeve of his top before wrenching it back down in frustration as he saw what he didn't want to see. I just hope we'll get enough time. This plan is risky in the first place, but it has to work. If it doesn't, then we may get in a lot of trouble. It will, said Nozomi without a single moment of hesitation. Any plan thought up by the prince is one we will all follow anyway. You say that, but it doesn't seem like Miss Dogen is too fond at me at the moment. You know why that is? Yeah, acknowledged Ichigo. I know why. Securing the swords, Ichigo opened the window before jumping out and halting in the air. Make sure you cheer for me, Nozomi. You wouldn't want us to lose just yet, would you? We wouldn't. Nozomi glanced towards Mercurius before climbing out the window herself and preparing to jump down. I will start my investigations then. I will inform you of my progress. Good. Don't stay too long. I can't guarantee how long the games will last today. Trust me, you don't want to be there when the king returns. I'll be careful. Good luck to you as well. Luck? For me. Ichigo smirked, crossing his arms. With how blind everyone is there, I won't need it. Protector of the fairies. Leon? Are you okay? Leon looked up at the worried expression on Jovia's face, shaking his head as if trying to reassure even himself. I'm fine, Jovia, Leon replied, trying to shake off his worries. Ever since he had seen Gray again, something had been nagging him at the back of his mind. Something he should be noticing or remembering, and yet for the life of him he couldn't think of what it might be. Is it about Gray? Asked Jovia. Leon looked up in surprise, as if to ask how she knew as Jovia shook her head at his surprise. Honestly, you don't need to try and hide it. I didn't want to worry you. It's just, I'm worried about him. You know. Because of what he said yesterday, right? Jovia spared a glance towards the fairy tale booth, spotting Gray sitting at one side and staring straight into the empty arena. I told you about my time when I was trying to revive Delira. Back then, I was nothing short of arrogant, confident in my skills, so much so that I believed I was unbeatable. I believed no one would ever be able to stop me because I was so confident that I had surpassed her. I even went as far to abandon the two-hand style of molding to use a single-hand variation. I remember. And it was Gray who stopped you. I see. He was the one who said back then how important the style was and dragged you back to the right path. And now you see yourself in him. Not exactly. Leon frowned as he gripped the railing, sneaking a glance towards Gray. The thing about the whole one-hand form is that it is weaker. And yet I could sense no instability in what Gray created. It's molding magic, there is no doubt, and yet something is different about it. It's what Gray said about it. How it was weak and how he was removing that weakness from himself. Jovia frowned herself, looking at Gray. But that's the stance gave to you and him. I know. For him to dismiss it like that, it's to deny everything taught us. And I can understand the need to move forward, but the Gray I knew would never say such a thing, even if he was moving away from it. Evolution is impossible to stop, and wouldn't care if he no longer needed it, so long as he could handle himself, and yet Gray dismisses what she taught to him as useless now. He doesn't just reject her, he rejects the ideals she tried to pass on to us too. Did he seem the same to you when we met him before the games began? Asked Jovia curiously. He seemed different then as well, but in a different way from the fight. It was almost like he was faking his smiles, and he even looked as if he was trying to hold himself back. I did notice. And when he fought, he went to kill. I didn't want Raventail to win, but even the lengths he went to were far beyond what Gray would normally go to. He had won when he trapped Kurohibi, and yet he freed him just so he could keep fighting and break that man further. Jovia glanced over towards Raventail, spotting Kurohibi leaning to one side on a light crutch. His wounds looked worse when bandages wrapped around one side of his face and snuck down under his clothes. She was surprised to see him here in such a condition, especially as his wounds must have still hurt. Something seemed off though. He's faking it, muttered Jovia after a few moments of observing him. The crutch, I mean. The way he's holding it, it all seems too familiar, as if he had seen it and copied it. He wants us to underestimate him then. Make us let our guard down. Like we'd fall for that. It may not be for our sake. Leon gestured back towards Gray. He won't even look towards their stands, even if he glanced around at everyone else. Again, he's different. This time it looks as if he's almost ashamed to be sitting there, and at the same time terrified. Hell, if could see him now, well, I think she might have once. When she first met him. Leon trailed off, gripping his head tightly as he struggled to remember. Damn it, what was it? I know I can remember this, but it's been so long, and my memories of aren't the best at this stage anyway. What is? A memory? I just can't remember which. Something has been bothering me about Gray, however. Something I should have noticed. He's always been fairly good at manipulating ice, and the more I think about it, the more I remember of how skilled he was. But even taking that into account, there is still something. Something I forget from our time with her. Don't strain yourself, said Jovia worriedly. It'll come to you. I know, muttered Leon. Just, why do I have such a strange sense of dread? Looking back at Gray, his eyes seemed to widen slightly as a single line flashed through his memory. I'll seal away your darkness. Protector of the Fairies. Check the description for the links to the author.